Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran, and I'm ecstatic that you're checking out this content today. We have two people for you, two creators. We have Mr. Destiny, Stephen Bennell II, a controversial liberal and progressive creator who's good at debate. And then we have a TikTok racist conservative. I don't say racist because I'm being funny. I'm saying racist because she got caught on a TikTok making food and then saying the N-word with an A. It wasn't particularly racist, but what ended up happening was a bunch of far-right freaks started supporting her. She let it get to her head, and she realized that she could actually just say offensively racist stuff on the internet and make tons of money as a result. So that is Lilly Gaddis, in my opinion. We'll see if they have anything substantive to say. But for the next 49 minutes or so, we're going to have the content of Stephen Bennell, an excellent debate lord, debating a racist conservatarian grifter. Not even conservatarian. That's rude to libertarians. Not even conservative. That's rude to conservatives. A racist far-right grifter on the LA riots and ICE. So let's go ahead and get these characters on our screen. Let's see if they have any substantive, anything substantive to say.
A manufactured crisis or a real state of emergency? Immigration raids sparked protests in Los Angeles, but are demonstrators solely to blame for the clashes? Or have President Trump's broader anti-immigration policies fanned these flames? Is it xenophobia? Or are these America First policies that the president was elected to enforce? That debate coming up on Counterpoints with me, Melinda Nusafora.
Ah, she stole my name.
A manufactured crisis or a real state of emergency?
What? I don't want to. Come on, let's go. He's got better graphics than I do, though.
Welcome to the land of liberty.
Okay.
Really bad people like.
It's a shame that you guys are trying to start a civil war on your own people.
What's heartbreaking the most because they're making it seem like they're really bad people, like criminals, and when they're not, when they're just trying to work hard for their own families.
He's going to try to go to so that he has a martial law. He even alluded to civil war at one point.
President Trump made the highly controversial decision to call in the National Guard, arguing LA's protests against immigration officials were violent. Their arrival sparked more anger, which led to more violence, which in turn gave ammunition to the White House to argue migrants are causing chaos across America. So is the use of the National Guard in this instance justifiable? LA Mayor Karen Bass doesn't think so.
But what we're seeing in Los Angeles is chaos that is provoked by the administration. When you raid Home Depot and workplaces, when you tear parents and children apart, and when you run...
Christmas asked an important question. Does Grillhotism have a flag? Not yet. I'll work on that.
Armored caravans through our streets, you cause fear and you cause panic. And deploying federalized troops is a dangerous escalation.
The immigration raids targeting undocumented workers coincide with the introduction of tough new US travel restrictions. People from 19 countries are now either partially or totally banned from entering the US.
I'm going to fast forward. I think we all know that there's a little immigration crisis going on. I want to get to the debate segment of it. So we're going to go ahead and fast forward. Just to summarize this, though, this is kind of like, I don't know, 60 IQ analysis. But, you know, what else do you expect from media these days? Is it a manufactured crisis? No, it's not. What's going on is that for decades, America has been addicted to cheap under the table labor. And this has been a mutually beneficial economic proposition where migrants from another country can come here and work for around minimum wage or less than minimum wage with no benefits. And they've been able to remit that back to their home countries in Central and South America. And so as a result, since that money goes further in Central and South America, it's an excellent economic opportunity if they're willing to risk the dangers of the travel, if they're willing to risk arrest in the United States, if they're willing to risk the harsh conditions of agricultural and construction work, then it gives them the capacity to make a substantive amount of money, more money than they would be able to make at home. And then so America gets cheap labor for agriculture and construction. Central and South America gets the ability to make more money than they normally make and then send that money home. And that's been the status quo for years. Everybody's complained about it as a problem, but nobody does anything to fix it. Trump made the mistake of trying to quote unquote fix this problem by doing a mass deportation operation. But what you're going to find is that there's humanitarian motivations for why people want to stay here. And then there's also economic motivations for why people want to stay here. So there will be a rebellion from segments of the population in order to do this. So did I lose chat? It looks like I'm hard stuck at one comment. So if somebody is in chat, go ahead and please type something or I'm going to refresh it. But yeah, you guys are doing edgy comments and then my chat froze. Oh, there we go. There we go. Test. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So anyways, we know the characters that we're dealing with. We know the topic that they're going to be discussing. Let's go ahead and see if they do an intro and actually get into the meat of the issue.
To discuss the LA protests, the Trump administration's response and the wider debate on tackling immigration, we're joined by Steve Bennell, also known as Destiny, who's a YouTuber and political commentator. And on our panel as well, Lilly Gaddis, a cultural commentator who hosts the Gaddis Report for the Australian National Review. Thanks to both of you for joining us here on Counterpoints. Well, President Trump was elected on a promise to crack down on illegal migration in America. And he says that's exactly what he's doing. Here's a tweet, a social media post from his Truth Social site where the president wrote, "Los Angeles has been invaded and occupied by illegal aliens and criminals," he wrote. He went on to say his administration would do everything necessary to liberate Los Angeles from the migrant invasion and put an end to these migrant riots.
Okay, I have commentary before they even start doing a debate. A once great American city, Los Angeles, has been invaded and occupied by illegal aliens and criminals. And this is the craziest language to use in the wake of the war on terror. And this is where I get pissed off at libertarians and conservatarians who are allegedly worried about like a state crackdown on freedom. Right? The entire narrative from this group is that George W. Bush launched the war on terror. Some people think that 9/11 was an inside job. I think that's very silly, but some of them do. And they use that in order to build up a security apparatus state that was used and mastered overseas that they're going to import back home and then use against the domestic population in order to create a dystopian authoritarian police state. But listen to the language done by Donald Trump. A once great American city, LA, has been invaded and occupied by illegal aliens and criminals. So in my mind already, I'm imagining like brown people with AK-47s. That's what I'm imagining. Now, is that hyperbole? Sure. But is he engaged in a hyperbole? Absolutely. Now, violent insurrectionist mobs are swarming and attacking our federal agents to try and stop our deportation operations. This could be descriptively true that a riot is trying to prevent deportation operations. However, it feels a little rich from the guy who instigated January 6th. But these lawless riots only strengthen our resolve. I'm directing Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and Attorney General Pam Bondi in coordination with all other relevant departments and agencies to take all action necessary to liberate Los Angeles from the migrant invasion and put an end to these migrant riots. Order will be restored, the illegals will be expelled, and Los Angeles will be set free. Thank you. Los Angeles will be set free. Again, I think it's playing into the militant language. So the fact that the conservatarians, the libertarians have this dude who's effectively doing everything that they've complained about happening for the past 20 years is actually frustrating to me, because at the very least, they can acknowledge that it's ironic, right? At the very least, they could say, oh yeah, it actually is ironic that I'm cheering this guy on. You know what I'm saying? I feel, going back to chat, because we have a few dozen people instead of a few hundred people, which is actually good because I get to chill with my homies. K Soko says, I feel your use of Bennell, you have to use Stephen as well. I agree. Whatever 4690 says, according to CNN, the general public support the deportations. Okay. Lady, whatever 4690, I support deportations to a degree. I support deporting any criminal or any person who's socially unproductive. And what I mean by that is, let's say that we have a guy who came to this country, they don't work, they deal weed, and they stole a social security number in order to get onto social benefits. I don't know if that's possible, but let's just say that that's the case as an example. deport that person, maybe incarcerate that person depending on how severe their crime is. Let's say we have a tatted up Central American gangster who is not a citizen, who has been accused of murder and is like credibly accused of gangbanging and drug dealing. Deport him or incarcerate him. I don't care about securing the border and securing the criminal populations. What I do think is counterproductive, the reason why I think there's riots, the reason why I think that there's going to be a backlash in the midterms towards the Trump admin is because they're not just going after people who somehow gamed welfare systems and or deal drugs and or commit violence. That's not who they're going after. They're going after the people who work in agriculture, the people who work in construction, the people who support the economy, the people who are business owners, the people who run barbershops, the people who run taquerias. I'm not being like racist. I'm actually saying, like, I saw a story of a taqueria owner who was married for like 20 or 30 years get deported. So they're like small business owners and wages and workers. And that's where you're going to have the rebellion, because you're harassing working class men and women, even if they're from a different country, and they're people who prop up our economy. Sean Kaplan says human rights don't matter if you're illegal / sarcastic. Yeah. Tatsu says the protests in LA looked better with less violence and crime last night compared to a few days ago. Good. Val says tread on me harder, daddy has more or less become the Republican response to anything Trump does. And it's embarrassing. That's what Val said. And I'm saying, as a Republican, it's embarrassing. Kyle says more like the imperial boomerang effect. Our foreign policy is coming back to bite us. Not surprised there. All right. Anyways, let's continue on with the content.
Now, the protesters are rallying against ICE enforcement, many concerned about the agency's tactics and actions and its impact on the broader community.
Good morning, Gen X. Good to see you.
Destiny, let's start with you. Do you think these protests are justified in any sense when you consider the president has a mandate to crack down on illegal migration?
Yeah, of course. I think people have been really fearful about a lot of behavior of ICE, a lot of the behavior of this administration, much of which has been pushed back on by the courts. You see Abrego Garcia coming back. You see multiple TROs being issued nationwide. I think that protesting the administration and their actions, I think is totally fine. I think it can also be wholly consistent with enforcing a border and enforcing immigration policy. There's no reason why we can't deport criminals. There's no reason why we can't enforce law at the border, while also recognizing that it's important that, you know, states are allowed to exist with the individual states' rights they had. Like all the Republicans were celebrating Abbott when he wanted to do his states' rights stuff against Biden, but now it seems like people are celebrating Trump, you know, arbitrarily sending the National Guard to California, even though Newsom says they're not needed at all. Yeah, so I think it's okay for people to protest. I think that's fine. I think rioters should be arrested. I don't see any reason why the National Guard has to be deployed here other than Trump just trying to make a show of force.
Lily, what do you think? Do you see?
And by the way, you don't have to, if you're like a lefty or like a progressive or whatever, and you think that this is too moderate or this is catering to fascists, or you think that this is too like centrist cucked or whatever, that's totally fine. Like I would understand how like a far lefty would be like, no, we're on the verge of like a fascist overthrow, and this is just them throwing down the gauntlet in the worst way possible, and you're conceding. That's fine. But I think that maybe in a vacuum, which might not be appropriate at this time, but I think what Stephen just said and what I just said, I think is perfectly sane and sober.
See a justification for these protests? If it's a land of free speech, the right to assembly?
Right. Well, I absolutely agree with, you know, people's right to free speech. I want people to be able to go out on the streets and protest and rally in a peaceful, nonviolent way. As long as you're not breaking the law, then I don't see a problem with it. That's an important part of living in a democracy. That's an important part of living in the United States, where we have those sort of freedoms. But what we're seeing is the opposite of that. We have people throwing Molotov cocktails. We have people attacking the ICE vehicles, and it's a violent protest. So I think Trump's response is definitely warranted. When you have vast amounts of people trying to, I don't know, kill ICE agents, who knows, or cause as much damage as possible, and you have a civilian populace that you also have to protect, sometimes the police are simply not equipped for that. So in certain instances, it is a good thing to bring out the National Guard and have a strong show of force so that people do not feel comfortable with violating other people's rights by being violent, by attacking ICE vehicles and anything like that, which is illegal, which is not free speech, and which is not the right to protest, because they're engaging in violent attacks against these people. They're not just speaking their mind.
what about the notion, Destiny, I'll ask you first and I'll come back to you, Lily, for a response, that these protesters were provoked? It's almost as if it's been orchestrated for the protests to fail, so to speak, because there is so much provocation. That's one criticism that's been leveled against the Trump administration.
Which is cringe. Whenever 4690 says, I see Abrego Garcia, I don't know how to spell his name, gang member and people smuggler. Yeah. So let's go ahead and address this, whatever 4690. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, I've mentioned on stream before, I think was a bad choice for, and a lot of Democratic people don't like it when I say this, but, it is what it is. I think that he was a bad choice as a martyr for the mass deportation campaign, and that the people who chose him as a martyr should have, done some research and figured out like, he actually he was caught hanging out with gang members. He was caught out, caught with $1,500 in a Home Depot parking lot while hanging out with MS-13 gang members and also wearing gang affiliated clothing. He does have tattoos that could be construed as being gang affiliation. He does have a credible accusation of domestic violence, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's not to say that he isn't entitled to due process. He's always entitled to due process, as are all people within the United States. And that's the crux of the issue. That's what people should care about. But if you're looking for a better martyr, then I think that Henry, what is it? Let me go ahead and find his name. But this is kind of the problem, right? Because I can't bring up his name because I don't know him anywhere near as well. Hairdresser, deported to El Salvador. And Andre Hernandez. Andre Hernandez Romero should be more famous than Kilmar Abrego Garcia, but unfortunately, that's just not how our media works. This gentleman, his tattoos, his accusations of being like a part of Trenda Aragua, like a terrorist organization, is he has a couple of tattoos that say mom and dad and have like crowns on his wrists. Yeah, there you go. There it is. Mom and dad with crowns. And so the crowns were viewed as like a touch point for him being a gang member. He's been working as a makeup artist. He's gay, so he's, probably at risk of being brutalized in Sukkot. And he was sent to Sukkot without due process. So if I was able to time travel, if I was able to advise the Democratic establishment and media establishment perfectly, I would tell them, don't make Kilmar Abrego Garcia your martyr. Make Andre Hernandez Romero your martyr. And then that doesn't mean that the human rights abuses and the lack of due process that everybody is complaining about isn't happening. So, yeah, bro. So you can cheer on Kilmar Abrego Garcia coming back, getting a criminal conviction and then getting deported again. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a problem.
I mean, I think they're being provocative with the National Guard, of course. I agree, rule of law is important. You can't have people engaging in violent acts, but you absolutely don't need to send the National Guard for every single protest. The first protests were a few dozen people. I think the second protest on June 7th, was like 105 people or something. It was like a little bit over 100 people. Why are we deploying the National Guard for this? I feel like the deployment of the National Guard.
Sorry, you guys are having interesting questions and commentary in chat, so I want to address it. So Bud123 says, hey, if states and cities are allowing rioters to burn down their cities, it's up to the federal government to stop it. Bud123, I agree with you in principle, but correct me if I'm wrong. Aren't like 90% of the pictures that we saw, aren't they all like the same street with the same asshole on a dirt bike burning the same 3 cars? Like LA riots 2025. I'm not saying it couldn't have gotten worse, or there couldn't be other blocks, or there couldn't be places that are getting. That's the cars that I'm talking about. That's the guys that I'm talking about. That's the same guy that I've seen a billion times. This is the same street that I've seen a billion times. This is pretty. This right here, where they're actually blowing up fireworks and smashing cars and setting cop cars on fire. Yeah, I'm thinking it's starting to get there. And then what's the other one? This guy, you can hate him. I hate him. But that pick goes hard, right? That pick goes hard as hell. So anyways, the question is whether or not law enforcement could handle this. Then the question is whether or not law enforcement and the National Guard could handle this. And then the National Guard don't need to be federalized, but Trump is trying to stomp it out as quickly as possible. And then the final thing is, do you need Marines? And what I think is funny about the Marines, what is actually the point of deploying Marines outside of a political stunt? No, I think it's like a straight political stunt. The reason why the Marines can be deployed, and the reason why I think they mentioned two Army regiments can be deployed, is because they have charters as a part of their their force organization where they can be deployed as emergency reserve forces anywhere on the planet, including inside the United States of America. But then Congress has to reauthorize their deployment. So that's why Marines can be deployed. But that, to me, normalizing deploying federal troops onto domestic soil, that's how republics die. So I'm not really interested in that being normalized, particularly under a Trump admin. The damage that the rioters can do is not, it's nowhere near what Trump can do by normalizing deploying federal troops on domestic soil. In those instances, the governor will call for the National Guard. Exactly. Tagarung says Trump publishes his enemies more consistently than he rewards his servants, not being punished as a reward. Imagine giving into these tactics. Yeah, it's very crony. It's very nepotistic. We don't negotiate with terrorists. Sure. Kay Soko says, well, I will say it again, Connor. We did not choose him. The admin chose him. Can we be honest on that? Kay, thanks. Love you. I don't know specifically who you mean. Please use names when referencing people. However, I do think that the broad mandate talking point is kind of dumb, where it's what, like 52% of the population voted for him. And they're like, oh, he has a broad democratic mandate in order to crack down on immigration. And it's like, I mean, people care about immigration. Immigration matters 100%, but he won by 1.7%. So let's not get crazy here. It's not like 80% of the population voted for him. Death Lily says, well, it was conservative media that set the martyr. Probably. I wouldn't be surprised. Silver Jacket Man says, and like you said, that's why due process is a thing. Yeah, no, due process should have been more centered than the character. I agree with that. Christian Blair says, Trinidad Aragua isn't really a terrorist org in a traditional war on terror sense. What terrorist attacks have they committed against the U.S. or its interests? Yeah, no, I agree. They're exaggerating what Trinidad Aragua and MS-13 are, because they do horrific things. They do gang murders. They chop people up. They torture people. They deal drugs that kills tens of thousands of people, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, they're not killing people for political ends. And so it's a mislabeling so they can use broader authority. That's actually my fear. That's my fear. It's not whether or not Mexican cartels need to be cracked down on. They do. The question is whether or not it's a law enforcement issue or whether or not it's a war on terror issue, and whether or not we're using the war on terror in order to embolden an already authoritarian administration. Haircut Commander says, the protests are in like a 5-block area, and yeah, all those photos are literally just the same 4 cars. Yeah, bro. Don't know. Could become another BLM. It might. But here's the thing. Let me address this and then get back into the content. It could become another BLM. I agree. It could be another Summer of Love. But is that because there's pusillanimous Democratic governors and mayors who are allowing the riots to happen because they think that it's good optics for them to cater to a giga progressive anti-central government, whatever? Is that what's happening? Or is what's happening are people are legitimately pissed about chasing? Dude, every other day on Twitter, I see like a video of like a mom in an elementary school parking lot. That's what I saw yesterday. I saw this lady who was probably like late 30s in an elementary school parking lot getting arrested while she's picking up her kids, and she's screaming and she's crying and she's saying, mi hijos, mi hijos, mi hijos. Is she illegal? Yeah. Are the kids illegal? No idea. Where are the kids going when school's over? No idea. And so as a result, you have this like totally jacked up situation where you have a mom who, what's her crime? Her crime is living on the wrong side of the border. If she's an actual criminal, if she deals drugs, if she beats people up, if she kills people, then yeah, sure, whatever. But it doesn't look like they're going after those people. It looks like they're going after normies. InPave says, how is stomping it out isn't calling up the Guard and the Marines an escalation at this point? Well, yeah, but the question is whether or not it's a justified escalation. I'm not afraid of force to the same degree that everybody else is. Yeah. Anyways, let's get back to the content. Chat, as always, is more intelligent and insightful. 3,000 IQ, Giga Chads, and Giga Stacy's in my chat. But we should try to get through the content. Possum Nation brings up an interesting point, though, which is hit the like button. it's free.
It was so arbitrary. It was almost self-defeating by Trump. Gavin Newsom pointed out that Trump was truthing out that the National Guard had managed to quell all of the rioting and it was incredibly successful in its mission. And Trump had posted that truth on Truth Social before the National Guard had even made it to the ground. So I think that it is definitely provocative. I don't think people on the left should be taking the bait. There's no reason to burn stuff down or do anything like that. But I mean, I wish that Trump would stop constantly turning the temperature up on every single conversation just to try to take eyes away from his failed trade policy, his failed international policy, his failed policy in Gaza, his failed domestic policy, like everything else. Like I wish that he could just try to govern for real instead of just constantly being a provocateur in every single arena.
What do you make of that, Lily? Is this an attempted distraction by the president to try and cause some chaos in one area so that people aren't really looking at where there may have been some stumbling blocks?
I mean, I think there is a valid
Epstein, anyone?
argument to be said that it could be a distraction, because right now we have the New York Times breaking that Palantir is collecting all of people's data, and now that we're possibly living on the brink of a police state and a surveillance state governed by.
Ooh, all right. Oh, I got pause-andied and owned in the marketplace of ideas. Earlier, I was arguing, why aren't the libertarians and conservatives and conservatarians? Why aren't they calling out the fact that, you know, a police state is brewing under the authoritarianism of Trump? And here's Lily. She's proven me wrong. All right. Good job, Lily. Good job.
By AI. That's a major story that people should be looking at. We're also on the cusp of a war with Iran. I mean, this deal with Iran is coming.
Ah, dang it.
Into the last days. And this is what people should be focusing on. They should be focusing on trying to keep us out of this war and trying to make sure that, the powers that be that are controlling our government do not amass any more power or bring in Palantir to surveillance all of us. So in that case, I would agree. I don't think it's necessarily about other things, but I think the main things that people should be focusing on right now is the Palantir takeover and this kind of subversion of the Trump administration through these tech bros and through the PayPal mafia. That's what people should be looking at. And we should also be looking at this potential war with Iran, which is the deadline's coming to an end.
What do you make, Lily, of the argument that the rage that is being expressed on the streets in Los Angeles is justified when you consider that it is life and death for some of these people that are being forcibly removed from the United States, in some cases illegally?
Well, I mean, if that's the argument, then you could make the same argument for anyone who's being arrested for any crime. Like, say you get a DUI and now the cops are going to arrest you. Does that warrant an outrage because people don't want people being arrested for breaking the law? I mean, at the end of the day, like, if you didn't want to be deported, if you didn't want to face that fear of being deported, you should have come in legally. It's there. The option is there to come in legally. But these people decided to break the law, and now they are facing the consequences of it. And I believe that they feel like if they throw a big enough fit, if they cause enough, wreak enough havoc on the towns that they're doing this in Los Angeles at the current moment, that they're going to get their way and they'll make the Trump administration back down. But that's not what people voted Trump for. They voted Trump in to get rid of this illegal alien problem, because we have millions of these people in our country. They are bringing drugs. They are bringing fentanyl. They are driving the crime rate up.
Some of them are rapists. Some of them are murderers. Some of them, might be good people. Dr. Plague Doctor says, in your opinion, as a law enforcement officer, would there be a better method or course of action for ICE to arrest people in a sanctuary city? Do you think that this sort of reaction was an inevitability? Yeah. Dr. Plague Doctor, I'm going to go ahead and concede that some of this nastiness might be necessary with the mandate that's being given to the Trump admin, right? And what I mean by that is that ICE has a broad mandate in order to detect, find, incarcerate, and deport illegal aliens. And being an illegal alien in and of itself is a crime or a civil infraction. Overstaying a visa is already an infraction great enough to get ICE's attention and get law enforcement attention. So they're doing their jobs in a sense. And I understand that. And so ultimately there might not be an optical way to do it. However, I think what's going on, which could be good for the left in a weird way, is that when you're arresting a dude who's covered in tattoos head to toe, he's accused of drug dealing, he's accused of murders, nobody cares, right? Send his ass to Sakkut, give him like a 20-minute trial in the United States, send him to Sakkut, nobody cares. But when you have Mrs. Hernandez, who has worked at the laundromat for 15 years, who has 2 or 3 kids who are citizens, who, is getting arrested in the elementary school parking lot, is she legally violating something for which she can be incarcerated and deported? 100%. Does she have an automatic right to stay in the United States? No. But what law enforcement purpose is being served? What justice is being furthered through that incarceration and deportation? And I think that's where we're kind of talking past each other when it comes to the pro-deportation conservatives and the, moderates. Where we're talking past each other is the pro-deportation people are appealing to law. And I think that the moderates and the anti-deportation people are appealing to justice. And those are not always lined up. Sin Patty says, Connor, exactly. It's so evil looking at it when they're just pulling people who are just living their lives. Disgusting. Yeah. And I don't want to live in an anarchic, no borders, open borders, post-national Mad Max hellhole. I'm not interested in that either. Dank Brandon says, also it's LA. There's more stuff burning when they make a movie and they block off more. Well, listen, guys, I don't want to make the mistake of accepting that riots are just part and parcel of living in a major city. Okay. I don't want to make that mistake morally. I don't want to make that mistake optically. But do 700 pissed off Marines from the worst duty station in the Marine Corps need to get sent into a city to beat up random civilians? Probably not. Gen X says, it's not the force, it's that it's illegal. Trump made it applicable to all states. He just usurping power of other entities as much as he can get away with. That's the problem. GRT says, if your admin is such a constant state of crisis that you need emergency authorities to do your agenda, maybe you're a bad leader. I mean, you said it, not me. InPave says, if your goal is to squash it, but you escalate the violence, how are you squashing anything? InPave, because overwhelming force can stomp out a rebellion before it takes root. So that's why. And if you're like, hey, violence just begets violence, guys, then I would just point to you to World War II. We didn't stop the Japanese with hugs and kisses. We bombed the heck out of them until they surrendered. We didn't stop Nazi Germany with hugs and kisses. We bombed the heck out of them until they surrendered. And then we, destroyed half of their country through fire and close combat. So no, force can 100% work. You just have to have overwhelming force. Jack Darko says, why does the Australian have lav mics akimbo? I don't know, man. She's just hardcore like that. Sun Patty says she's obfuscating because those are easy L's to take since there's no marching orders. Yeah, but I do like the fact that she actually did point to 2 conspiracy theories that should be concerning to the right wing, but don't seem to be. It seems like she has some level of honesty that she's actually, instead of saying, oh no, the Trump admin is amazing, they would never do anything wrong. I think it is good that she's actually like, no, actually Palantir instituting a random police state is kind of creepy. And I'm worried about a war with Iran. That actually shows that she's capable of being critical of the Trump admin, even if she's pandering to a conspiratorial audience. Sorry, I'm going to scoot you guys. You're too far up. It's not Trump, it's the broligarchs. True. All right, we're at around 100 people. I parasocially love each and every single one of you for showing up and spending a part of your day with me. I'm going to do a quick shill. We'll let the content play. Like the stream if you haven't liked it already. It's free. It lets other people know that we're live. They come in, they have a good time. Engage in chat. There's lots of really smart, funny, weird people in chat, and they're having a good time. If you want to join the Discord, let me know. I'll link the Discord sometime during the content. And then also on Tuesdays, we're live on Counterpoints. So right now, I think we're still demonetized on the Valor Media Network channel just because of a paperwork kerfuffle. But if you want to support me financially, you can go to patreon.com/counterpoints and you can donate there. Alternatively, you can just do super chats and memberships on Tuesdays when I'm live on my home channel.
Taking away jobs from the American citizen. And these are all things that people want the Trump administration to crack hard down on. So I think it is important that, people keep their eye on the ball and are not distracted by people throwing a fit.
Destiny, what do you make of that? And what do you make of the idea that if these people are in the US illegally without the appropriate documentation, isn't it an expectation that they will be caught and dealt with, and that this is something that President Trump was elected to do?
I mean, it's the risk that you run, but I really wish that we could just have an honest conversation about immigration, about illegal immigration, about what to do with the people here. It just seems like endless hand-wringing sometimes from some people, and then endless virtue signaling from other people. I would say the virtue signaling right now is coming from the conservatives. If we want to do something about immigration, then we need to have a comprehensive plan for how to allow people to come into the country, how to document the people that are currently here, and then how to control the border better. But it feels like conservatives just want to crack down on illegal immigration and then do nothing about like actual immigration. Earlier Lilly said that there's a legal way to come in. There is, and the wait list is like 20 plus years. Like the reality is most people, especially if they are feeling economically destitute, or if they feel like there are way better opportunities in this country, which there are because this country is awesome, the people are probably going to illegally immigrate. I just wish that we could have a better conversation about what to do with the people here. We're not deporting 13, 15 million people. Most of the people in this country don't even want that. They might say it now, but when apartment complexes start emptying out, when businesses start losing their workers, when the unemployment falls even lower, when inflation starts to take off even higher, like people aren't going to be happy with that. There has to be a realistic path towards how do you document the people here? How do you control what's happening at the border? But
this is a good point from Stephen. Somebody did the math on Twitter where our current maximum deportations per day, allegedly we have the capacity for 4,500 per day. But it seems like ICE has only been able to max out around 2,200. And if we're deporting 2,200 people per day, then it would take 14 years in order to deport 10 million people. And the estimates for illegal immigrants in the United States is between 10 and 20 million. So it seems to me that is like a symbolic, near complete waste of time, money, resources, and energy. We should 100% secure the border. I'm more of like a border hawk than most of the liberals and Democrats that you're going to come across. Again, never Trump Republican. We should 100% secure the border. We should 100% vet all the people who are currently here. And we should come up with some kind of green card, work visa process for the people who are actually socially productive. We should 100% deport the people who are scamming social benefit services and either deport or incarcerate criminals. All of that should be done. But then what we need to do is we need to look at the economic needs of the United States and how fast we're able to integrate people into our culture. We need to agree on what makes the United States good. And then we need to figure out how to bring in new immigrants for our economic needs, integrate them into our overall culture, and then have them be, productive, socially productive, economically productive members of our community. And I think that if you talk to most average Americans, they don't have a particularly negative perspective of Hispanics in general. Like, of course, we all hate the giga tattooed gangbangers. Of course, we hate like the ethnic enclaves that don't want to interact with any other parts of America. Of course, we hate the crime and the sex trafficking and the drug trafficking and all that kind of stuff. But if you're talking about like your average Joe Hispanic dude on the side of the road, most of those people are awesome. And almost anybody who interacts with them love them. So that's where we need to differentiate the criminal population from, like, I guess what you would call civilians. Just for the sake of letting the content flow, I'm just going to let the content flow, even though Chad is popping off right now. Like the stream. Watch the Counterpoints home channel for VODs.
In order to do that, you have to go to Congress, you've got to talk to the people, and you have to actually hammer out some incredibly sophisticated and difficult to work on legislation. And nobody wants to do that right now. They just want to do executive orders, and they want to have, ICE running around and having dramatic, Twitter moments on social media. And I don't know, it just feels like that's all we're doing right now.
Lilly, what?
Hold on. Whatever 4690 says, again, they defended Garcia a criminal. Criminals deserve defense, particularly during legal proceedings. You don't know who is a criminal until you do a legal proceeding. So everybody's entitled to due process, including bad people.
What's your take? I mean, the idea that about 10% of the workforce in California is made up of migrant workers. Clearly, there is a need. That state is very open about the fact that it relies heavily on migrant workers. So undocumented or not, doesn't the community need them?
Well, I think the caveat that people are not mentioning and with this argument that they are filling jobs that Americans don't want or they're not doing, what everybody's missing is these employers do need these workers. They do need cheap labor. They do need essentially slave labor from other countries where they can pay them less than an American citizen would take.
Okay. This pisses me off. Okay. Hello, 104 people. I parasocially love you. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go full screen so I can go ahead and do a rant. So I can explain something to the half dozen conservatives that hang out with us, okay? Guys, chattel slavery. Everybody knows what you're doing. I know what you're doing. Chat knows what you're doing. Everybody knows what you're doing whenever you appeal to slavery. But this isn't accurate at all. Chattel slavery in the United States was, we went to West Africa, there were warring kingdoms, and we paid the warring kingdoms to kidnap their neighbors and sell them to us as slaves. Then we brought those people to the United States and we said, because you are racially identifiable separate from us, you are perpetually enslaved. So not only are you slaves, but your children will be slaves and your children's children will be slaves. And then we said that you are not fully human and we will beat the crap out of you if you disobey us. We will kill you if you try to escape. Your natural hierarchy is to obey us in all things. And while you're not fully human, you need to be okay with your property owners, the people who own you physically, coming in and, having sex / raping you some of the time. It's just going to happen. That was the deal for chattel slavery. Okay. And then add in the whipping, add in the abuse, add in the Civil War, add in all that stuff. That's chattel slavery, which is one of the most grievous sins in American history. Then what we have in the modern context is Central and South Americans who know that when they live in rural or Central America, they can't make a lot of money. It's economically depressed. There's not as many vibrant social and economic institutions. And not just that, there is a black market economy that dominates through the drug trade. So your options as a young man are participate in the drug trade, not that much money in order to survive, or there's a third option, go to the United States. And what's going to happen if you go to the United States is you're going to work your ass off, okay? You are going to sweat your dick off and you're going to have 70-hour weeks, right? But what's going to happen is through the the fiscal disparity between a peso and a dollar, you'll make $5 to $10 an hour working your dick off as an agricultural worker or a construction worker. And $5 to $10 isn't going to last you that much in America, but you can get 3 or 4 roommates in a 2-bedroom apartment. You can all ride to work in the same truck. You can, get cheap meals from the gas station. And if you bust ass for 5 to 10 years, making $5 to $10 an hour, you can send half of that money home to your family. And because of the difference between a peso and a dollar, that money can add up to getting a house, putting your kids through school, getting better access to better neighborhoods, and effectively having a Central American middle-class life. So if you wake up every single day as a Central American and you're like, okay, I can be economically fucked here, I can participate in a black market trade that could get me killed, or I can go to the United States of America, work my ass off, make a shitload of money, and then send it home. It's not a lot of money here, but it's a lot of money back home. Obviously, a substantive amount of people are going to pick option number 3. We haven't solved that economic problem. And when conservatives say that it's akin to chattel slavery, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You're exaggerating a moral wrong so you can appeal to the horrors of American slavery while not contending with what's actually happening in front of your face. End of rant. Shaved Dog Butt says, went to a mosque, threw a couple of rocks, told the Ayatollah, gonna put you in a box. Very rude. Don't do that. Seger's No says, I assume you would never make this argument to a guy accused of the R slur. I assume you would want someone in the Brock Turner to get his day in court despite hearing the evidence. Yeah, that's a thing, man. And like whatever 4690, I'm not going to try to bully you or pick on you today. I'm a little bit too tired to do that. However, the truth is everybody deserves their day in court. Even rapists, serial killers, all that kind of stuff, they deserve their day in court. Now, if they're proven beyond a reasonable doubt or proven beyond a shadow of a doubt to have committed an egregious crime, then if you want to throw them into a giant pit of crocodiles, I don't give a shit. But everybody is entitled to the due process in order to figure out whether or not they're actually innocent or guilty. Bud123 says, do you think the Democrats in Congress crack down on Palantir surveillance if they win the midterms, or would they look the other way? They're going to look the other way. Everybody likes a robust military security state. Tagarung says, why even engage with them? These Groyper arslers always take the conversation to the lowest denomination. Don't feed them. Wrong, Tagarung, and you're going to have to get used to this in my chat, okay? We are here not just to build a community around, you know, opposing the authoritarian shenanigans of the Trump admin. We're also here so the few people who are willing to consider our ideas hopefully eventually see that we're correct. So no, if there's Groypers, if there's far right wingers, if there's schizophrenics who want to engage with us, we're going to engage with them. Dark Brandon says, it sort of sounded like Elon was beaming talking points to her with that one. Gen X points out, we're breaking 100 a day, boys. We're at 110. I parasocially love each and every one of you. Quick shill. Like the stream. Watch the Counterpoints VODs. Super chats on Tuesdays. And then when we get monetized again, super chat again. LB says, Connor, please stop speaking for the left. You don't understand the difference between progressives and libs. Yeah, I do, LB. Don't act like I'm a noob. You're not the only person who understands the difference. And if you want me to specify, you know, when I'm, by the way, never Trump Republican. If liberals want to say that I'm going too far right, then say that I'm going too far right. I don't care. That's totally fine. I represent me, and I'm trying to convince you that I am correct. I understand that I'm not going to get you, LB, but there's other people who might think that I'm correct. Excuse me. All right, back to the content. I hope you enjoyed my rant, though. I thought it was a good rant. Good job, Connor.
Take. An American citizen expects, you know, normal work hours. They expect a good work environment, and they expect to be paid at least minimum wage. Now, if you import millions of people from countries where they're used to making pennies and dimes on an hour, then those people are willing to make concessions.
Sorry, real quick. Henry Wilkins says, swore the oath 4 times and never unswore it. This is total Nazi fascist propaganda. Yeah, Henry Wilkins, I'm with you. I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America, and I'm shocked how many people are willing to betray their oaths.
People are willing to live together, multiple people in a house, sometimes illegally, and they're willing to receive less pay for that, considering that they're usually getting paid under the table, so they're not having to deal with taxes and all the things that American citizens have to deal with. So that's a major issue right there, and I think that's why Trump's cracking down on the employers that are incentivizing this thing, because it's not only taking away jobs from Americans who would be willing to do those jobs at a decent pay rate.
Sorry for pausing so frequently. In order to get me on a roof, you're going to have to pay me $30 an hour, man. You're going to have to pay me a minimum of $30 an hour. I do want medical and dental as a part of that. So like you don't have to give me 30 plus medical and dental, but I need to make 30 an hour, and then medical and dental is taken out of that. There's no way I'm roofing in July for less than $30 an hour. Sorry. I like my air-conditioned job. I like my stupid email job.
But they're not going to take those jobs if they're getting paid pennies and dimes. But these employers have been taking advantage. Really, I mean, if you want a virtue signal for the immigrants, this is exploitation. They're essentially bringing in slave labor to do jobs at half the wages that American would do that. So I think, yes, maybe temporarily the economy would suffer a bit, but we would get back on track, and then Americans and employers would have to work that out to where they work at a rate that would satisfy both the employer and the worker.
Which is interesting, because that's a left-wing talking point coming out of a conservative's mouth. Not that I think that negotiating for labor is like a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's interesting seeing economic left-wing arguments coming out of the Trump right. Randy Chung says, is it fair talking about prison labor and slave labor terms? Randy Chung, you can, because it's compelled labor, but I still, prison labor still isn't chattel. It doesn't get passed down to your kids. And while you can get beaten for resisting things during prison, I don't think anybody's, busting out like a pirate style cat of nine tails to whip your back. You know what I'm saying? So if you want to point to the coercion, if you want to point to the threat of violence, if you want to point to the fact that prison labor makes like 7 cents an hour or whatever, then yeah, go ahead and point out all of those things. But I still think that we can agree that chattel slavery is worse than modern prison labor.
Isn't that just an argument, though, as to also why the US should allow more legal migration, that these people without documentation should be brought into the legal fold so that this isn't perpetually just being an exploitative culture?
Well, personally, I don't really want any more immigrants here. I don't want any more legal immigrants, and I don't want any more illegal immigrants. We have
Why
enough
is that?
people as it is. Well, because it makes Americans suffer. It not only affects the culture, so it changes the demographics of the country,
I'm going to do a leg workout while we're watching this.
which will affect the white people who live in this country, but it's also going to affect, things like housing. Now Americans are struggling with housing. The cost of housing is going way up because now we're competing with millions of other people. So it hurts your economy. It hurts the everyday person because now they're struggling with these people and they.
Oh, I see Steven's eyeballs narrowing. I see his pupils dilating. I see them narrowing, actually. They're not dilating. They're not opening up because he's like, high. They're narrowing because he's like a predator and he hears a moron making economic arguments. Everybody put on your seatbelts. Put on your seatbelts.
Can't find houses. They're competing with people at slave labor. And even if we did have someone come in and they were taking normal wages, that's still taking a job away from an American citizen. I would rather that job be done by an American citizen than someone who just got here and they're here for economic opportunity rather than they're fleeing a dangerous situation, which is the majority of these immigrants.
Destiny?
Usually you can tell when the person you're arguing with or a person who's presenting arguments is being dishonest is when they're trying to present a thing that can give you like the pros of every side of an equation. The reality is for any given thing, especially economically, usually this works policy-wise as well, there's usually pros and there's usually cons. And the goal is to try.
Oh, come on, Steve. Why are you on 1 HP, bro? Where's the fire? Let's go. She made a bunch of dumb economic arguments. Let's go. Come on. Wake up. I know he's sick. I know he was just sick. But I saw him drinking his Starbucks, bro. He needs to be on it. He needs to be on fire. Let's go.
Try to get as much of the pros as possible while minimizing the negative impacts of the cons. The idea that if you deport 12 or 13 million workers, that would only result in pros for the American average citizen is so unbelievably and unfathomably ludicrous. It defies the understanding of every single part of society, all the way from government budgets, which are benefited by illegal immigrants who pay taxes into Social Security that they'll never withdraw from, all the way down to local economies where you've got people who are able to, rent buildings out to people that are renting them, even if they're legal immigrants. You've got employers who are able to hire people, even if they might be paying them under the table or whatever. And then at the end of that transaction, you've got customers who are enjoying lower prices and a greater diversity of things that they can buy from as a result of that. If you want to get rid of all of the illegal immigrants and then you want to curb down, or you want to curb legal immigration, then fine, but you have to be honest about what's on the other end of that transaction. Prices are going to be higher for everybody. A whole bunch of small businesses are going to shut down. Housing prices, yes, might go down, but that means that homeowners that own houses are going to see the value of their own home decrease. You're going to see the foreclosure or the closing of a lot of residential buildings that people are renting from. I think that if you want to make that argument, I think it's an interesting argument to have, but it's so unbelievably boring when people try to argue that you can get the pros of every possible side of an equation if you just do the one thing that they like the most. I've never heard anybody make the concession that, yeah, we're going to deport 50 million people and it is going to be economically painful, but I think that economic pain is worth whatever other project I think America should be or whatever idea I have about what immigration should look like.
The only person I've seen make that argument is JD Vance, weirdly enough. JD Vance had an interview where the interviewer was pretty smart and they were like, listen, you're saying that you're going to deport 10 million people. Aren't going to have all these knock-on effects? Aren't prices going to go up in agriculture? Aren't prices going to go up in construction? Aren't we going to lose substantive amounts of people? So many economies are going to implode. Aren't there going to be less taxpayers who are paying like sales and value added taxes? Aren't we going to have all these knock-on effects? And JD Vance was like, you know what? You're right. That's all going to happen. But I would rather have American citizens, white, black, and Hispanic citizens be prioritized over cheap consumer goods. And as a result, if that results in a little bit of economic pain, I don't care. That is the only person that I have seen own that is JD Vance. Now, I'm not going to lie, Stephen has a variety of reasons for why, he could not be as fired up as he normally is. But he needs to drink his coffee and take his ADD meds and, stretch out before he does the debate or whatever, because this is like 1 HP voice and he needs to be like at 100 and say like, this is the, as a matter of fact, let me go ahead and do a Destiny impression. This is the most economically illiterate thing that I've ever heard in my entire life. I can't believe that you're talking about imploding miniature economies, reducing the amount of people who are renting, reducing your tax base, and you're acting like it's a good thing. These are things that not just benefit the immigrants, it's things that benefit the American citizen as well. What are you talking about? That's what I wanted from Steven, right? That's what I wanted. And instead we got, 1 HP. So we'll give him some time. Maybe he's warming up. Maybe he needs to stretch out his hamstrings a little bit. Engaging with chat before we move on. LB says, hey, Connor, some immigrants are doctors, lawyers, and teachers too, not just sling a hammer. LB, I agree with you. However, due to certification processes, oftentimes they're stuck in working class positions. As an example, the local daycare to me that my children actually went to is run by Venezuelan immigrants, but I'm pretty sure they actually got refugee status and they have like social security numbers and W-9s and all that kind of crap. And they're running a local daycare. They were teachers. They were highly credited teachers back in Venezuela. So of course there's highly credited people back who are coming into our country, but you have to bear in mind, they're even going to be, especially in the early years of their immigration process, relegated to working class jobs as they get the certifications necessary in order to participate in the white collar economy of the United States. Randy Chang says, my understanding is that it is paid, but only nominally. If you're talking about prison labor, that's true. It's like 7 cents an hour. It's almost nothing, which I think is what I think. This is my solution for prisoners, which everybody will hate, is I think that prisoners should get minimum wage and that 10% of it should be put into commissary, but 90% of it should be put into a savings account that is used to secure housing when they leave the incarceral system, right? It should basically be a forced savings account to help people get back on their feet when they're no longer incarcerated. So, you can still get very, very, very cheap labor. You can still get people making license plates for $7 an hour, $7.25 an hour. And then instead of it being 7 cents an hour that they spend on Hot Pockets and what's the other thing that they don't do Hot Pockets. What do they do? Ramen is very popular in prison. And then there's also some kind of pastry. Honey buns are very popular in prison. So instead of spending 7 cents an hour on honey buns and ramen, they instead get paid $7.25 an hour. $1.25 an hour can go to honey buns and ramen, but then $6 an hour goes towards a savings account that helps them get reestablished when they're no longer incarcerated. I think that would be brilliant policy. Gray Jedi says at Counterpoints, people don't talk about how the U.S. has used seasonal labor from the mid-1800s to the 1920s. Then we made laws to kick those people out. Yeah, it's very silly. We're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're cutting off our nose to spite our face. And I'm going to have to institute, we're breaking like 1:30 right now. Parasocial love to you and yours. Thank you for hanging out with us. Please like the stream. But I'm going to have to start instituting the @Counterpoints rule. If you want me to respond to your statement or question, then you need to do @Counterpoints in chat. Pelican says, Connor, you are going too far right. Love a concerned social lib. That's okay. I have to earn my never Trump Republican bona fide somewhere. Starhawk says, I haven't said anything unless that was a royal you. Interesting. Illegal immigrants do pay taxes. They pay value added taxes. They don't pay income taxes, right? Unless I'm totally misunderstanding the economy. GRT says, put that hairbrush down. Your mother said no grooming on stream. No, I need to look beautiful for my audience. When has Trump cracked down on employers? Very recently. Bibliolife says you're a cheap hoe. True. Scrolling, looking for @Connor or @Counterpoints or @Valor Media Network in chat because I can't answer everything because chat is popping off again. I love you guys for popping off. Val, I think I've seen you on Twitter. I don't think many Americans are going to take seasonal farm work versus stable permanent employment. They're not going to. Dark Brandon says, @Connor, what things do you do while sitting to keep your legs and core worked out? So I don't work out my core. I'm actually quite hunched over. I shouldn't do that as much. But right now I'm using something called a monkey foot. It's a roller skate boot that wraps around dumbbells so you can lift weights with your legs. Connor, let's see some body weight squats. I'll do 100 with you parasocially. bumbling bioengineer, I'll do that at the end of my leg workout. We'll make everybody do it at the end of stream. Remind me at the end of stream, and we'll do 100 squats before we leave. Valor Media Network, next time you talk to Steve, get him to the roof inflation talking point to counter the Hispanic slavery talking point. Roofs going down, going from 15 to 20K to 30 to 40K is a stinky thing to own. Yep. All right, I'm going to pause there with that being my last. That's going to be my last until I do it. If you want my attention, if you want me to read your chat, comment, question, whatever, then do at Valor Media Network or at Counterpoints or at Connor, and I will read those. If you do not put that in your chat, there are too many chats for me to read all of them. Back to the content.
Lily?
Well, I mean, I did say that there would be short-term economic, mishaps to that. The economy is going to suffer. But again, in the long term, what is better? Is it better to replace the native population with migrants coming from other countries, which is now going to drive the quality of living down, the quality of work life down? Because if you're competing with illegal immigrants or legal immigrants who are used to coming from countries, again, where they get paid hardly anything, now Americans are going to have to make those concessions. Now Americans are going to say, you know what, it's fine. I'll shack up with 10 of my cousins and I'll live in a tiny house with tons of people and I'll work for slave wages as well, because this is what I'm competing with, because we're outnumbered at this point. Another thing is, what nobody wants to talk about is you lose the racial demographics in your country. Is it wrong for a person in our country to want a country that's majority white? Is that a wrong thing? And if you replace the native populace with people from other countries, that is going to change that culture. So it's no longer going to be the United States or America as we know it. It's going to look like a reflection of the UK, look like a reflection of all these other European countries who tried mass migration, and look how it's failing. People
But America is a country of migrants.
No rights.
America is a country that was founded by migrants.
Was it though? I mean, who are the founders? They were white Americans that came over here, and then they would.
Unless it's the Native Americans, which I don't necessarily think that America probably wants to pin their cultural responsibilities on. Destiny, what's your take on this? Sounds a bit like the Great Replacement theory.
I mean,
Come on, Steven, wake up, pop the Vyvanse, drink a coffee, do what you got to do, bro. Come on. Don't give me 1 HP, Destiny. Give me 99 HP, Destiny. Let's go.
Like, if somebody wants to have the argument for maintaining a white majority country, then fine, but at least be honest and have the argument. It's not an economic argument. It's a racial demographics argument. If you're willing to make dramatic sacrifices in terms of where the U.S. sits at in the world, right now we are the leading country in the world, economically, militarily, diplomatically. Well, I guess we'll see by the end of this presidency. But we enjoy that status right now. And as a result of that, we enjoy a great deal of other things as well. People might laugh at the GDP go up number, but our standards of living are incredibly high in the United States. We're spoiled by a whole bunch of goods and services. You've got a whole bunch of teenagers on Twitter right now who are complaining about oppression because the 4-payment loan they took out on their burrito taxi app is all of a sudden, unable to be paid by them because they're not getting enough allowance from their parents. I mean, I would argue these are good problems to have. If you want to try to shoot for some ethnically homogenous society, I guess my first question is, who are we even trying to look like at that point? Are we envious of Japan that's been in stagflation for the past 3 decades? Are we envious of what, Iran, of North Korea? Who are these ethnically homogenous countries that we're so jealous of their economic and cultural output? I mean, I don't know. Again, but if you want to have that argument, that's fine, but just don't conflate it with the economic one. This is an economically ruinous argument, or at least it's a loser of an economic argument. But again, that's fine, but just be willing to take both sides of that. I'm willing to suffer, not just in the short term. It will be a long-term decreased standard of living. It will be a long-term decrease access to goods and services from the average American person. And that doesn't just mean fancy new iPhones. It might mean an instrument for your child to go and practice on for school, or it might mean newer textbooks for a class, or it might mean internet access for people in rural areas. If you're willing to accept a lower turnout on all of that stuff in exchange for a wider country, whatever that means, I guess. I guess then we could talk about who counts as white or not. We have to go to the Eastern Europeans and figure that one out. Then fine, have that argument.
So, sorry. Steven, in my opinion, is still bringing 10% of his normal energy to the debate. So, I'll try to steel man or say where I think that he should go. Is realistically, I think this would be hilarious if he called her out on her BS. Like obviously this is like more of like a news show. It's Al Arabiya English. It's more professional. We got, a lady in a suit who's talking to these people. So, you can't go totally wild with it. But I would love to call out this lady, Lilly Gaddis, and be like, okay, who's white? Are we talking about just Anglo-Saxons, or are we also including like Swedes and Northern Europeans? Are we talking about Germans? Are we talking about Celts? Are we talking about Iberians? Are we talking about Italians? Are we talking about Etruscans? Are we talking about Lombards? Are we talking about Slavs? Are we talking about Russians? Who fits in the white supermajority? And then when she's like, oh, yeah, well, it's just everybody who's like, European, then it's going to be like, oh, OK. So when we have Sicilians are a part of Europe and they can be quite dark skinned. We're going to include Sicilians and Spanish. And then all you can do is like appeal at, I think it's called ad absurdum. Appeal ad absurdum to the delineation of, I think it's like Loki's wager, where Loki is like the god of mischief. And they're talking about beheading him. And there's something where he says like, well, my head actually starts down here, so you can't cut there, you can't cut there, you can't cut there. And before you know it, you can't cut anywhere because you would actually like cut a part of his head or something like that. I forget Loki's wager, but it's effectively like a bluffing tactic to get people to actually delineate their arguments. Sacred Snow says, do you still think we should pay minimum wage to prisoners if we abolish private prisons? I think abolishing private prisons is a moral ought, but I don't know how feasible minimum wage would be. Yeah, Sacred Snow, we have to, in my opinion, completely reorient the conservative mind, because it's still trapped in the shadow of Reagan, where the what is it, like the 6 scariest words or 7 scariest words, I don't know how many words it is, but I'm here from the government and I'm here to help. The scariest 9 words in the English language, according to Ronald Reagan. Need to totally shift that line of thinking in the conservatarian and conservative party. And then also you need to accept that there are social oughts that do not have a return on investment. And until you normalize that line of thinking within the conservatives, you're never going to get like, I don't know, well-intended and well-designed social policy. LB says, I agree. We should pay prisoners $7 an hour. Also, felons should absolutely have the right to vote. We have a felon president. Let's not get too crazy with it. Although felon used to be a delineating argument within the criminal justice system that your crime was so egregious that you should have your social rights restricted. And right now, stealing more than $300 worth of stuff can result in a felony. Having more than, like an ounce of weed can result in a felony. So felony has been totally overdone. Biblical Life says, you a cheap labor hoe for doing roofing for $30 an hour? Oh, wow. I didn't know I was cheap. I thought I was expensive. Dandelion Redux says, you're a high-end expensive hoe? You guys are cute. LB says they pay income taxes, Connor, $100 billion a year. We're going to Google that before we move on, because I don't think you're right. I'm not talking about all immigrants. I'm talking about illegal immigrants. How would an illegal immigrant pay income tax if paying them itself is illegal and you have to pay them under the table? Do illegal immigrants pay income tax? There's no way. Yes, undocumented immigrants in the United States generally pay income taxes. How they pay: individual taxpayer identification number. Undocumented immigrants who are ineligible for a social security number can obtain an ITIN for the IRS for the purpose of filing and paying taxes. Tax filing and withholding. Many undocumented immigrants file taxes returns using their ITIN to report their income and pay income tax, including any required payroll taxes. That's crazy. That's crazy to be in a country illegally and then file your taxes. There's no way in hell you would catch me dead doing that. Tax contributions by undocumented immigrants in 2022. Federal income tax is $20 billion, so I don't agree with you. State and local taxes, that's going to be the value-added taxes and sales taxes. I'm not counting that. Federal social insurance taxes is $32 billion. I have no idea how they're paying that, but that's already crazy. Miscellaneous federal tax is 7.6. So I'm going to say that 45 billion of your $100 billion amount, I'm going to reject because that's not what I'm talking about. But the fact that we even have $50 billion in federal revenue coming from illegal immigrants in voluntarily paid taxes is one of the craziest things I've ever heard. That is bananas. Yeah, if I'm illegally immigrating to a country, there's no way I'm filing taxes. Bumbling says, Connor, do you think integrating a national service program with an immigration process is a good idea? Yeah, 100%. If you're an immigrant or an illegal immigrant and you want to fast track for citizenship, I think you should absolutely be able to like be a postal worker for 4 years, be a military service member for 4 years, or be like a Peace Corps volunteer for 4 years, and then that should, give you some kind of fast track to citizenship. 100%. GI Robot says, no, I did legs yesterday. Don't worry, my squats will get really sloppy towards the end. Tagaroong says 100 squats or you have to join the membership, boys and girls. True. Eden Foley says, Connor, they also get a social security number to work and that deducts taxes like SSI. If they're using a fake social security number, sure. Starhawk says, you are mistaking me for someone else. I literally did not say anything of the sort. Okay. Eden Foley says, Connor, but they won't be able to collect from it later since it's not attached to them. Interesting. All right. I'm scrolling. I'm looking for at Valor Media Network, at Counterpoints, or at Connor. Although this looks like an interesting comment. Sargon yesterday argued it was an ethnic conflict. This gal is wanting it to be one as well. The lens we look through matters. Oh, 100%. There's this guy named Joe Rittenhouse on Twitter who's trying to argue with me that Sargon of Akkad is not an ethno-nationalist. And every single thing that Sargon of Akkad was arguing yesterday was rooted in ethno-nationalism and political corporatism. Henry Wilkins says, what the fudge? Is this Hitler's granddaughter? What effing school did she go to? She didn't go to school. She's on TikTok. Don't worry about it. All right. Y'all are popping off, but you're not addressing me, and so I'm going to continue. Dylan says, no way in hell they are including Italians, lol. This is Dylan Thomas. Nice. All right, back to the content.
Lily, so pick up on one thing that Destiny said there. What is this racially homogenous country that you think America should be emulating? What's the ideal here? Who should we be looking to as guidance?
I don't think we have to look to anyone else. I think we can do it on our own. We did it on our own for a long time before we started mass immigrating from other cultures that are not compatible with the West. Back in the, Ellis Islands.
Come on, dude, this chick is like she's like she's a talking points machine, man. All right, geography lesson. Sorry, she said something so wildly stupid it can't be left unaddressed. And I don't trust 1 HP Steven to address it. Spain, Google Maps. Oh my God, you guys are so... I hate race realists so much. They're so fucking stupid. All right, sorry for the F-bomb. This is me in Central Florida. Don't dox me. All right. Anyways, when we're talking about the continent of the United States of America, or not United States of America, we're talking about the continent of the Americas. There's several people that are here. It is anthropologically suggested that humans made it out of Africa into Eurasia and then crossed the strait at some point and then migrated into the Americas and then used this as a land bridge in order to get into South America. I hope we can all agree that the indigenous people of the Americas who survived genocide and colonization deserve to live here. I hope we can agree on that. So if you're indigenous and you live here, or you're indigenous and you live here, you 100% have a right to stay here. That's number one. Number two, when we're talking about colonization of the Americas, there's probably 3 major players with a bunch of minor players. So the major players in North America are going to be France and England. And they have a bunch of wars between each other where they have parallel cultures where these people speak English and Gaelic and these people speak French. But besides that, they actually have pretty parallel medieval cultures that interacted a lot. And so the English, because they're an island nation, overpopulated, and they had a bunch of political dissidents, they colonized the shit out of the eastern seaboard of the United States. And then the French colonized this territory. And then they also got like Louisiana, and they claimed vast swaths of this territory. But this is two countries that colonized this area. Do you know who colonized this area? The next countries over, Portugal and Spain. And so when you have a lady, a dumb lady, Lilly Gaddis, saying like, oh, incompatible with the West, and 95% of the immigration into the United States, or not into the United States, but into the United States and the Americas, is from people who are already in Central and South America, you're somehow saying that the indigenous people of America and 90% people who come from probably, let's face it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 European nations that are all right next to each other are culturally incompatible with each other. That is the most ahistorical, stupid analysis I've ever heard in my entire life. And if you want to say that people in the Middle East and North Africa or people in Asia have values that are contradictory to Europeans, that's totally, whatever. Let's have that argument. Let's talk about history. Let's talk about religion. Let's talk about, perspectives on race and colonization and all that kind of crap. But to pretend Native Americans and 5 European countries can't figure out how to get along together is one of the most ahistorical, dumb statements that I've ever heard on the news ever. And it's embarrassing that Lilly Gaddis is a socially relevant commentator. She's not that relevant, so we shouldn't freak out. But the fact that she's able to get onto a news show in order to say the stupid shit she says is frustrating.
Days, who were we importing people from? They were white Europeans from Ireland, from Scotland, from England, and that those people assimilated well. Those people came into our country and they wanted to be Americans. If you to go back to,
and by the way, there were race riots. There were race riots by the Irish. There was oppression riots by the Irish. There were labor riots by the Irish. I know. I'm ethnically descended from Irish people. I'm familiar with the history of the Irish people in the 19th century. So don't act like we just came over here and it was all awesome and it was all, rainbows and sunshine. That's not what happened. That's a sanitization of the immigration experience of the Irish American. Don't hit me with that. Same thing with the Italians. Don't, listen, Italians, do they deserve bigotry against them? Probably. But was it all, sunshine and rainbows and the Italians just came here and it was like perfect integration? Absolutely not. Don't hit me with this baloney.
the LA riots, if you take a look at the pictures coming out of there, what is it? It's a lot of illegals flying the flags of their native country. Why are you here then? If you're protesting being sent back to your country, why are you flying the flag of that country? These people clearly do not want to assimilate. They clearly do not care about our culture. They are not part of our culture, and they don't want to be part of our culture, as they make it very clear. They love to display their flags of their country that they came from. They love to keep their little subcultures homogenous, and they do not want to blend in with ours. They will simply want to take over ours. And then the white people who live here, who have historically lived here, and black people, you could argue, it's actually, if you want to talk about black rights, these illegal immigrants are invading the
Holy crap, she's actually 90 IQ.
areas that
Not us. Everybody in my chat is 3,000 IQ, Giga Chats, and Giga Stacy's. This person looks like a Stacy, but they're actually a moron.
been predominantly black, and now they're forcing people out. So that in and of itself hurts not only white people, but black people who have been here for a while as well.
Destiny, I'll let you have the right of reply on that, and then we'll move on to our next section.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that these immigrants came through Ellis Island and immediately integrated is kind of comical. I mean,
thank you, 1 HP, Steve.
People hated Irish people when they came over. There were slurs referring to Irish people. There are still jokes about Irish people. I just had a friend the other day tell me that they were an Irish twin because they had a sibling that was incredibly close in age. And there's a joke that Irish people made a whole bunch of babies when they came over. Italians were literally, you talk about MS-13. What about the mafia? What about the mob? They came over. They made ghettos. You could go to New York City today.
Bro, she knows. She knows. Look at this. Look at the announcer. Look at her smug recognition of somebody who has an IQ over 100. Look at this. Look at your screens if you are capable of looking at this. The announcer just knows that the blonde lady got BTFO'd. Take a look at this.
because they had a sibling that was incredibly close in age. And there's a joke that Irish people made a whole bunch of babies when they came over. Italians were literally, you talk about MS-13. What about the mafia? What about the mob? They came over.
Smirk, look down. Listen, I might be reading into this too much, but my body, I'm an expert psychologist and body language person, along with all my other accolades, okay? The smug look down, it's because she can't acknowledge that one of her people just blew the other person out of the water. So she has to pretend that she's still like, she's still objective as a moderator, even though she knows that that was a great point.
Over, they made ghettos. You could go to New York City today and you could visit Little Italy, and you can visit these small, ghettos that are primarily made up of certain groups of these types of people, of Italians, of Irishmen, of Irish people. Yeah, they did organized crime. It took a while for them to integrate, but they did. And I think to some extent, ironically, one of my favorite things about, I guess, far right people, or I don't want to say racist or xenophobic, whatever you call them, right? But the people.
Dude, she's hella racist. Just say it. Like what I say is, what I say when I call somebody racist is I'm not using as a pejorative. I'm being descriptive. Okay. I'm not trying to say, oh, you're racist. Let me clutch my pearls and say that you are beneath consideration. I'm saying, oh, you're racist. Let's contend with what makes you racist. And so that's where, like, I get it's cringe to call people like racist or fascist, because everybody's like, the left, they label anyone who doesn't agree with their orthodoxy as racist. And the left, they label anybody a fascist. And it's like, no, like, I'm being descriptive. You believe in political corporatism and flexible authoritarianism, you're a fascist. You believe that there's like a racial hierarchy and that different races can't integrate together, therefore you're racist. I'm not trying to pearl clutch about it. I'm saying that you believe certain things about certain things within reality.
People that are in favor of this like majority white immigration pattern, I think at times, I think they display unknowingly like some of the best of the United States' ability to integrate different types of people into its society and culture. Like if you would have gone back 100 years and then you would say today, oh no, people who are Irish and Italian are going to be seen as white, literally the exact same as anybody who came from Scandinavia or any Anglo-Saxons or people from Britain or whatever, they would laugh at you. They'd be like, no, these are totally different types of people. But now they're basically integrated. And yeah, I think we do that exceedingly well with all sorts of different types of people in the United States because of the way that we allow people to come into this country.
Okay, let's move.
Okay, 1 HP Steve did really good. Let me check in with chat there real quick because it has been a while. If you want me to read your comment or question, then go ahead and do at Valor Media Network, at Connor, at Counterpoints. I'll try to spot you in chat. Thank you to the 120 people who have been hanging out with us so far. Remember to like the stream. Grey Jedi says, I have mixed family and it pisses me off that people like this woman actually believe in the one drop rule. I agree. I think they're totally ahistorical freaks. Dark Brandon, or Dank Brandon, says, I think her answer would just be only blonde hair, blue eyed people are white. Nah, she's going to include, she already included the anybody who's European, right? Then Pelican says, I think LB is talking about felons. Okay. Undocumented Connor, illegal is racist. No, LB, don't hit me with your woke talking points. Gen X says, are you kidding? Did you watch Destiny on C-SPAN a few weeks ago? Lol, he doesn't hold back. That the host was said, that wasn't polite, Steven, and it was hilarious. I guess I need to watch C-SPAN then, huh? All right, scrolling. Mogged by undocumented immigrants again. True. 50 billion. How did Doge save again? 9. You can't reject the data. I did. I rejected LB. Bo Dickerson says, service for citizenship, Rome has entered the chat. Listen, man, if I could, I would. I just don't. I think there's probably secondary and tertiary effects that are going to hit society that I'm not calculating. Shaved Dog Butt says, on average, even illegal immigrants contribute more in taxes than they consume in services. $1.3 to $1.7 for every dollar consumed, higher than average native born than Americans. Sure, but that's not necessarily good, right? Like, it's economically productive, but it's not necessarily good that we just bring in immigrant labor, they contribute to the tax base, and then they aren't able to access services that help them out, right? Sapien Green says, we can ruin our country on our own. We don't need immigrants. Nice. Pelican says, just wait for Destiny's response. Yeah, you did good. 1 HP Steve is still mogging. Bumbling Bioengineer says, Grandfather Nurgle is pulling the strings behind RFK Jr. dissolution of the vaccine board. Yeah, totally crazy. For those of you who don't know, RFK was going to do a vaccine efficacy analysis of what causes autism. And then he dissolved and dismissed the board that would be responsible for the review. And he said it's because they're all like they're institutionalist shills who will confound his findings. St. Patty says, legit, a 20th century old baron's mistress racism. Yeah, dude. She would be more comfortable, honestly, this lady, Lilly Gaddis, she would be more comfortable being an Italian gal walking in New York City and then having some like rich sugar daddy in the early 20th century pick her up and be like, hey, you want to get married and have some of my children? You can be a socialite, kid. You can be a socialite and hang out and throw fancy dinner parties. She would be infinitely more comfortable 100 years ago. Ironside says, I don't know if that's true, but I'm just a Yakubian snow ape. Dang, that's racist as hell, bro. Whatever says, Sargon views the U.S. from the European lens. Yeah, and he's wrong, and he's very silly about it. Haircut Commander says, the West is being invaded by the West. Dude. Conservative liberalism says, can't trust those Iberian descendants. They're a shifty bunch. They come from the wrong side of the western end of Europe. Conservative liberalism, what you're saying is so true by the way that people viewed ethno-religious organizations like 100 years ago, that there 100% was bigotry against Iberians. But do you know who the first founding people of the Iberian Peninsula were? Celts. Celts. The Irish. The people with like freckles and red hair and light eyes. They were some of the first people to actively colonize the Iberian Peninsula were Celts. And so that's why when you look at Spanish people, they are a mix of like North African, Mediterranean, and Northern European features. It's crazy. All right, I'm going to read one or two more chats and then we're going to let them talk. Marcias says, to be fair to Nazi Barbie, you guys killed all the inhabitants before you moved in. Spaniards bred with them. I haven't. There's this awesome It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia thing. Matter of fact, I'm going to play it for you guys at the risk of getting copyright struck. Copyright strike time. Let's go ahead and risk the channel for 5 seconds of humor. Sunny in Philadelphia, Mayans, Mexicans. How Mayans became Mexicans. It's a 15-second clip. So pray that we don't get copyright struck, okay?
The Mexicans predicted that the world was going to end in 2012.
That was the Mayans, dude.
Mayans, Mexicans, what's the difference?
One difference is that the Mayans are extinct.
Yeah, the Mexicans killed the Mayans.
No, the Spaniards banged the Mayans, turned them into Mexicans.
Just in case you needed a history lesson from It's Always Sunny. I know the volume was very low, but that was max volume on YouTube, so you're going to have to deal with it.
Our attention and our focus away from race and migration just a little bit and focus on the presidential powers that were used during these past few days. So calling in the National Guard is usually the purview of state governors, but not in this case. President Trump's decision to send in the troops has been described by the Californian governor, Gavin Newsom, as an alarming abuse of power and a serious breach of state sovereignty. So one former US Secretary of Labor has called this the first stage of a police state. Lily, do you think he's right?
I mean, if you want to look at police state, again, I would go back to Palantir. Those are the people that want to have power every aspect of your life. That's what it says on their website. It's like AI automation for every decision of your life or whatever. Those are the people. Those are the people. The tech bros, the PayPal mafia. That's who you need to be looking at.
But for the moment, we're debating the National Guard. So if you could focus on that, do you think that this particular use of the National Guard, the cracking down on protests in this regard, is it the first stage of a police state, as the former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich says?
I don't think it is, because these people, they have to bring in the National Guard as backup for the police force, who has been very hurt over the past. I mean, look at BLM. During that whole time, you had the police basically stripped of their rights. They were told you can barely do anything. Then you had the George Floyd incident. So now cops are in this situation where they are kind of powerless. The LAPD especially, it's actually a very corrupt form of the police department. But the LAPD has been completely disarmed. The citizenry does not want them to do their job, so they really can't. Or they are not equipped for these sorts of riots, and they're kind of demoralized as well, just because of the years of propaganda against them and throwing people like Derek Chauvin in prison for those sorts of things. So I think the National Guard coming in is justified, considering that
she's hitting all of the talking points, man. She's hitting all of them.
These are very violent protests. They're burning down cars. They're throwing Molotov cocktails. They're throwing bricks. They're attacking police officers. They're attacking the National Guard. They're attacking the ICE thing. So how is that not warranted? If you have a police force that's somewhat debilitated, I feel like they just simply need backup. And by the way, they're not shooting people and mowing down people in the streets. They're using non-lethal force. They're using pepper spray. They're just giving some backup for people in a state that is very far left leaning, as well as full of immigrants, where they realize that there might be a fight there, so they had to bring in some backup.
They might not be shooting with bullets, but they did purposely shoot an Australian journalist in the leg while she was live on air. Destiny, what's your understanding or your interpretation of what you're seeing? Is this the first stage of a police state?
Unless I missed something.
It sure as hell can be.
Thing that came out recently in the executive order that Trump cited to deploy the National Guard, the U.S. code that he referred to, very specifically was one where you needed the states to actually, the governors to make the request for the National Guard assistance. USC 12406, you have to have the request of the governor to send the National Guard down to help. So him sending it down unrequested, again, to quell a relatively small number of people, right? This is the LAPD, California Highway Patrol. They have a lot of resources available to them. I have no idea. Well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I have no idea why he would send them down. I know why he sent them down. Like, he's sending it down in order to provoke people, with the goal being to somehow invoke some kind of violent protest or some kind of violence against the feds, so that he can continue to pile on forces into California, a state that he's already threatened to withhold emergency funding from when it comes to FEMA, a state that he already played emergency funding games with it when it came to the wildfires in Los Angeles. Yeah, I mean, like, there's a time and a place for the National Guard needing to be deployed. This is not it. Newsom said it wasn't. The mayor of New York said it wasn't. Or I'm sorry, the mayor of LA said that it wasn't. So there's absolutely no reason here other than to trample on the rights of states. But I mean, MAGA completely abandoned their whole federalism argument as soon as Trump won the popular vote. And now all you hear them say over and over again is he has a popular mandate, he has a popular mandate, he has a popular mandate. So the same party that was obsessed with saying, we don't live in a democracy, we live in a republic, is now the most democratic majority rules, majority vote people.
Boom! Owned! It's almost like MAGA has no frickin' principles. Dude, so sorry, real quick, like, that is something that legitimately pisses me off. I'm gonna go, well, I don't know if yeah, sure, full screen, whatever. This is something you have to understand. Never Trump Republican, right? That's me, right? The guy who was raised Republican, who was raised by fiscal conservatives, raised by social conservatives, raised by, had a neoconservative perspective foisted upon me as a child. And then I grew up with a Republican Party that was supposedly more moral and more, Christian and more this and more that than those filthy heathen Democrats. That's what I was raised with. And I was raised with the fact that the mob can do wildly stupid things and damage their own ends. And now we live in an era where the right wing, because I'm not even going to call them Republicans anymore, because they're not Republicans, because they don't believe in a republic. The right, they are appealing to populism, that they're actually using like a logical fallacy, like the appeal ad populum, in order to justify their policies. It's crazy. That has nothing to do with the Republican Party or the Republican values that I was raised with. I was raised with the antithesis of it. And yet I'm called a traitor to their cause, because when they do an appeal ad populum, I say, hey guys, just because the position is popular doesn't mean that it's the correct position. Shocking. Shocking, I know. So anyways, LB asked an important question. We'll get back into the content, but I want to show you something too. LB asked something that I hear progressives and lefties ask of what is American culture. And there are like asking what America culture is as an American is kind of like asking, like, how is water wet? You know what I'm saying? But a culture, I think we should probably Google it before we even answer that question. What is culture? Culture is shared beliefs, values, traditions, and practices of a group of people shaping their behavior and worldview. Okay. It can include language, religion, cuisine, social norms, art, and more. Essentially, culture is a learned and transmitted way of life from a particular group. So you can say that culture has evolved. Of course, it's evolved over the past like few centuries. But if you say, what is American culture? Well, American is like an Italian word. It comes from Amerigo Vespucci. So that obviously means that America began during the age of colonization. In North America, it involves like the pilgrims and the people who first colonized, who, you know, fought with, but also allied with Native American tribes in order to do the early stages of colonization. It also has to do with frontiersmen, who are people who ventured out of the early colonies in order to settle like the interior of the continent with, you know, smoothbore muskets. It's the Revolutionary War, where we went against the monarchies of Europe and we said that we're going to do our own thing. We're going to be independent and we are going to fight the powers that established us so we can become our own thing. It's Manifest Destiny, so it's colonization of the West, where we just spread westward and fought Native Americans in order to take over the western half of the United States of America. It is the Mexican-American War, where we took the Southwest United States, and it also is like the cavalry charges and the Battle of Little Bighorn and Wounded Knee and all that kind of stuff against the Native Americans. So it's colonization and battles. It's the frontiersman tradition continuing through the cowboy, which was only a decade or two, mind you. The cowboy was really only popular for like 4 decades, between like maybe a decade or two before the Civil War and a decade or two after the Civil War was really the only times that you had like cattle ranching and drives. But this was like a massive cultural influence, both at the time, because people liked hearing about these wild frontiersmen ranchers who live these independent lifestyles, basically surviving off of like frontiersmanship, survival skills, and a gun. So that's a huge part of American culture. And then industrialization, like the late 19th and early 20th century, modernizing into new cities, new technology, military technology, all that kind of stuff. And then it's the World War II and the post-Cold War era, along with the Banana Wars, which was, American and Philippine colonization. So, yeah, dude, like it's a lot of war. It's a lot of conquest. It's a lot of imperialism. But if you also go to what is Chinese culture, you're going to have 3,000 years of imperial history. If you go to what is Indian culture, you're going to have 3,000 years of civilization resisting being conquered. What is European culture? It's going to be like endless wars between these various tribal groups with upsprings of empire, like the Persian Empire, and I know that's Middle Eastern, North African, and Roman Empire. So you can't, you say, what is American culture? And there's obviously culture and history there. Just because it's confused and mixed up and all that kind of stuff doesn't mean it isn't there. I'm going to answer a few more questions before we continue. The Crawling Chaos says, it's over 9,000. True. 90 IQ is being generous. True. Looking for @Connors and @Valor Media Networks in chat. Sin Patty says that Connor, even if Destiny is at 1 HP, he still manages to dunk like LeBron. I know. It's sad. He's on 1 HP. She's at 100, and he's still dominating. Sad. Michelle Eggleton says, why do you use the corporatism definition rather than palingenetic ultranationalism in the 14 characteristics of Brit and Echo? Michelle Eggleston, I'm actually going to answer your question pretty aggressively. Not aggressively like I'm going to smack talk, but more like I think this is an important question. 14 points Umberto Eco. So let's take a look at this. Because definitions should be simple, okay? And definitions, palingenetic ultranationalism, meaning that we're appealing to an ancient history that we're trying to revivify, that isn't true in certain aspects of fascism. What is it? The fascism in Starship Troopers, the movie, doesn't have a palingenetic narrative. I'm pretty sure Spanish fascism didn't have a palingenetic narrative. Italian fascism, while having a palingenetic narrative, was related to the Empire of Rome. So it wasn't exclusively racial, right? And so that's why I don't use palingenetic ultranationalism, because the ultranationalism is its own thing. There are ultranationalists that aren't fascists. And then palingenesis, which is appealing to an old story, is not a necessary component of fascism. Fascism is political corporatism where you treat the nation state like a body and you advocate for its well-being on a holistic level, which I'm a political corporatist. I don't think that's necessarily evil, although it can be used for evil 100%. And then it's flexible authoritarianism where it's almost like a Sith Star Wars understanding of power, where you're not pursuing power because you think that it promotes an ideology. You're pursuing power for its own sake. That's very common in fascist tropes. So that's why I'm not using palingenetic ultranationalism. When it comes to the 14 points, sorry if this is another little bit of a history rant, but I actually think it's important. Let's go through the 14 points. The cult of tradition. Okay. Feudal lords had a cult of tradition. So are feudal lords fascist? No. The rejection of modernism. Modernism is a 200-year-old philosophy. So, and also postmodernists reject modernism. So are postmodern artists fascists? Obviously not. The cult of action for action's sake. I feel like that's scratching at flexible authoritarianism while not being sufficiently descriptive. Disagreement is treason. That's common in the left. That's common in giga progressive circles. That's common in communist authoritarian societies. Are authoritarian communists fascists? You can make an argument there, but they're not flexible authoritarians. They're pure authoritarians. Is Islamist regimes like the Iranian regime, are they fascist? No. But disagreement is treason. Fear of difference. Everybody's afraid of difference. Appeal to social frustration. Everybody does that. The Democrats do that. The Democratic Party does that. So are they fascists? Obviously not. The obsession with a plot. Everybody has their own meta-narrative. So again, that's not fascist. The enemy is both strong and weak. You can find this in politics all over the place. Pacifism is trafficking with the enemy. Authoritarian communists do that. I differentiate between communists and fascists. Contempt for the weak. I do think that is fascist in and of itself, but I think contempt for the weak also goes back up to the cult of action. And those two both point to flexible authoritarianism while not being fully definitionally good. Everybody is educated to become a hero. Okay, so because I like the Western meta-narrative and the hero of 1,000 faces, I'm fascist now? No, that's crazy. Everybody likes heroic narratives. Machismo and weaponry. I love machismo and weaponry. Am I fascist? No. Selective populism. Weirdly enough, that's Trump, and I think Trump does have fascist elements. But again, that goes back to flexible authoritarianism. Fascism speaks newspeak. Authoritarian communists did that as well. So to answer your question, I know that was like a long drawn out explanation, but the 14 points are simultaneously too specific and too vague and too long. And palingenesis isn't necessary for fascism. Where if I talk to any fascist, because they do exist, and I say that you're a political corporatist, you believe in the nation state as a body, and you believe that through seizing power, you can advocate for its well-being. They're not going to argue with me. They're going to say yes. And then if I say you believe in flexible authoritarianism, meaning that you don't care about institutions insofar as they grant power or perpetuate their own institutions, you care about fascism in order to further your own power. They're going to say yes. So I've taken your definition, made a better one. It's shorter, and I'm not overly specific, and I'm not overly vague. So I'm going to have to insist that my definition is better. Bumbling Engineer says, Connor, I'm just being accurate and descriptive by calling these people drooling M slurs. I'm only saying M slurs because it actually got me banned on Twitter. I actually love that word, and so does my mother, believe it or not. That fail to rub their two brain cells together. You're not wrong. All right, I'm going to catch up with chat just a little bit more, and then we'll get back to it. Dang, you guys are going crazy in chat fighting each other. Gray Jedi says, I bet she is the type that smack talks black and brown people, then eats their food and takes part in their culture without knowing. Funny quote from Nick Fuentes yesterday. He said, listen, guys, we can be racist and love Mexican food. That's a direct quote. You're already demonetized, Cotter. Let's go. No, Valor Media Network is trying to get remonetized. Silver Jacket Man says it's about the implication. Yes. All right. Anyways, I'm going to keep scrolling and find my next at Connor at Valor Media Network, but I'm going to go back to the content. I love you. Thank you for hanging out. Like the stream.
that have ever existed in the United States in my lifetime.
Lily, President Trump has joked outside the White House that if it was under his purview, he would arrest Gavin Newsom. I mean, is that really something we would expect to be hearing from our president during a situation like this?
I mean, I don't really care about jokes. They made whole rallies about grab her by the pussy, a joke that Trump made a long time ago. Why are we arguing about jokes? Unless he's acting on this, I don't see why it's a big deal personally. I think it's pretty.
You think it's okay to say that he would arrest the governor of California without?
Grab her by the wussy. It was not a joke. It's something that he said when he thought he was in a private conversation with someone. And then it's something that was alleged by somebody who he lost a civil suit to. Like if I'm not going to go through all of Donald Trump's like sexual exploits and his sexual improprieties, but to think that he was just saying that randomly on the bus, and then he also never did all the crap that he's admitted to doing in the past, and all of it was consensual and all of it was above board. And in the 1980s and 90s, he was asking for explicit consent, I think is total cope and total hypocrisy. And it's part of what repulses me about the modern right.
Without saying or any allegations as to why?
Well, first of all, it's a joke. So I think people are allowed to make jokes. That's his freedom of speech to make a joke about that. But again, it's not like that would be entirely unwarranted as well. I mean, look how Gavin Newsom handled the fires. The water was turned off. They just allowed the state to burn. I mean, he has been an extremely incompetent governor. So I'm sure lots of Californians would even approve of that. But
it's a joke, but also we should do it. Awesome. Awesome commentary, Lilly Gaddis.
Again, I don't even know why we're arguing about a joke. Unless he's doing something, I'm not interested in really arguing about a joke. Locker room talk. What? Okay, are we going to go protest more about grab her by the pussy? Like, please.
Destiny?
I just want to say real quick, I think it's really important to always observe the multiple stages of MAGA, and it's incredibly important for everyone to realize it. When you bring up something horrible that a MAGA person has done, the first step is always saying, oh, I don't know, I haven't heard about that. For some reason, they know every single intimate detail about, say, Hunter Biden, a person who wasn't elected. They know everything about his life. But then when it comes to like massive, huge things that the president of the United States is doing, they're unaware of it. So they'll say, I haven't heard about it. And then the next thing they'll say is, oh, it's just a joke or whatever. Who cares? It's not a big deal. But the most important thing, and they've demonstrated this time and time again, is the third part, which Lilly did do, and that's that they will defend it. So even though they're saying they haven't heard of it, even though they're saying it's just a joke, if it does come to pass, they're not going to turn around and go, oh my God, I thought he was just joking. This is horrible. They're going to defend exactly what it was. So
True 1 HP Destiny from the ropes. He jumps off of it, the crowd. He has a flying elbow and he smashes Lilly Gaddis in the rhetorical face. How does 1 HP Destiny do it? He's sick. He's tired. He hasn't had his hot chalky yet. And yet he's still throwing elbows off of the ropes. Crazy.
Don't ever let any MAGA person get away with the.
All right. I need to use the restroom, so I'll be back in 90 seconds to 2 minutes, but I'm going to leave you in the comfortable hands of Lilly Gaddis and Mr. Stephen Bennell II. Hassan, chair react time. When I come back, there better be plenty of spam chats like, Hassan chair, Hassan chair, Hassan chair. You better be cheering on my chair the same way that people watched Hassan.
Oh, they're just joking thing. You always have to ask them the next question of, oh, well, if he would actually follow through with it, would you defend it? Because the answer to that will almost always be yes.
Okay, Lily,
well,
do you want to answer that?
I'm not MAGA. To be fair, for clarification, I'm not MAGA. I'm a nationalist. So I'm actually not a huge fan of Trump.
If the governor was arrested, if I can pick up on what Destiny was saying, do you think that would be acceptable?
If he went through due process and it was found that he was either a traitor to his country or he had done something illegal, if he went through the due process, then absolutely. If he didn't go through due process and they just arrested him, then I would be opposed to that.
Okay, let's get back on track with the National Guard focus. Destiny, if this had have happened in a Republican state, if we were talking about a governor that wasn't Gavin Newsom, was a Republican governor, do you think President Trump would have been as quick to overrule him, say that he was incompetent, can't look after his own state and needs to swoop in with the troops?
I understand the substance of your question, and I'll say no, he wouldn't have. But I would have to clarify. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or not. It matters if you're loyal to Trump. Because if you're a Republican that kind of talked a little bit of smack about Trump, or you weren't always on Trump's side, Trump will come in and treat you just like you would a Democrat. Loyalty is very, very important to the king, to King Trump. So, but if it was like an ordinary MAGA Republican, which most of them are now, then no, he absolutely would not be acting the same way that he is now in California.
Lily, what do you think? Do you think we would see this in a red state? Do you think the fact that California is so vocal and the governor is so vocal against President Trump that it's maybe a little bit of point scoring here?
Possibly. I don't know. I feel like if there was massive riots like this in a red state, which I don't really think there would be, just because of the populace probably wouldn't allow that to happen. I believe if it was happening in a red state, Trump would still do it because he likes force of power. He likes to show power. He likes a demonstration of power. So I think if he felt like the PD at the area where these riots were going on, he would have deployed them as well.
Destiny, do you think that it would happen in a Republican state, or do you think that the populace wouldn't allow something like this to happen?
I think that the conditions are sufficiently different enough, like socially, demographically, everything else, that I can't see something like this happening in a red state. So I think in a very broad sense, I kind of agree with what Lily said.
All right, let's move on to our final segment, and it's a bit of a broader discussion.
Oh, dang, what'd I miss? I'm assuming that was the climax, actually. So since you've had 5 minutes of them uninterrupted, I'm going to read your chats for 5 minutes uninterrupted. Short Stack says, don't misinform the Groypers about my Iberian heritage. The Celts that came to Iberia are not the same as the soulless redheads that went to the Isles. True. Some redheaded racism. Big fan. I have red in my beard, but that means that I have like half of a soul. Thorson says, I love that what you said. You do not call someone racist to hold their ideas in contempt. Good faith engaging in their claims allows us to praise their logic and criticize their actual beliefs. Sure. AF says, good day, Connor in chat. Everyone looking especially handsome in 3000 IQ today. True. Matthew Morton says Connor's hairline is greater than Destiny's something. Well, don't worry. Maybe I'll lose my hair eventually, and then I'll have to shave it, and then I'll show you off my sweet bald head. Sen Patty says, thank God for this rant. My conservative father is making anti-capitalist talking points and sees nothing wrong with it. Yeah, dude, they've been suckered in. Bumbling Bioengineer says, Connor, when will you shave Israel into the left side of your beard to contemn October 7th? When I get paid, Chud Logic calls it tricks for treats. When I get like a 500 super chat, I'll shave the state of Israel into the side of my beard. Whatever 4690 says, culture is the story of a people. Well, I agree that everything I brought up is the story of America. All right, scrolling. QW Gar says, American culture is being able to go to school and see every race and religion there. Culture is our loud, boisterous ability to say we outwardly love or hate something. I could go on and on and on. Based. All right, I'm going to do one more. We export democracy, somebody says. Indeed. Thorson says, I love that you said you do not call someone racist to hold their ideas in contempt. Good faith and yeah, I think I read that one. Might be a second thing. And then Bumbling Bioengineer says, palingenetic refers to a concept of rebirth, renewal, or regeneration, often used in a political or philosophical context to describe a movement or ideology that emphasizes national revival. Right. But in my opinion, in order to have a palingenetic, a revival, you have to have something that was previous alive and currently dead. And while that's a powerful psychological narrative for people to engage with, I don't think palingenesis is necessary for fascism. It's just like a rhetorical device that fascists often use. What are American traditions, culture? America is formed through immigration. Whatever else blends comes from that. Sure, I don't think we disagree. It's militarism, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, industrialization, limited government, Republican rule of law, blues, rock and roll, strip clubs, liquor, tobacco cultivation, cotton cultivation, railroads, Chinatowns, all the crappy fast food that we make and eat. One of the funniest things about American culture is the two major things that we export to the exterior world is television and like movies and stuff, and then also fast food. So if you wanted to boil down American cultural exports to our two biggest exports, it's fast food and pop culture. It's very funny. Thorson says, definition should be as simple as possible. However, leaving out the key nuance for any definition like insurrection is corrupted code, allowing people to do insurrection without knowing they are. Sure. Sure, I agree. But that's where you should have a sufficiently simple definition, but you need to be prepared to understand and explain that definition if somebody has follow-up questions. All right. Then I'm going to scroll to the next one, and then I'm going to continue.
Now, moving away from necessarily what we're seeing in LA to more immigration policies in general, because these protests come in a broader context of the president's large-scale immigration crackdown. As of Monday, the president's new travel restrictions come into effect. 19 countries, predominantly in Africa, are now either partially or fully banned, their citizens partially or fully banned from traveling to the United States. Now, the president says it's in part in response to the attack in Boulder, Colorado. The suspect in that case was Egyptian. However, Egypt is...
I love how Trump is messing up so many things simultaneously that he reinstituted the Muslim ban, which was disastrous in his first presidency. And we barely noticed because he's so busy doing everything else crazy.
Not on this banned list. So, Lily, how do you interpret these restrictions? Are they reasonable or are they racist?
Well, first of all, I do agree with travel bans from other countries. I don't believe we should have people from countries that we're at war with, for example. But in this case, this is one of the major critiques that I have of Trump. This travel ban is not about, immigration restriction. It's not about being racist. This is a jab at Harvard. Harvard has been trying to protect its students' free speech in the sense that students there are very critical of Israel. Students there have this strong Free Palestine movement. And Trump has, and this is one of Trump's worst moves, aside from cozying up with Netanyahu, Trump has been actively attacking Harvard because they are standing by their students and they are not going to tell them, no, you can't criticize Israel. No, we're going to replace the entire Middle East studies with people who are only pro-Israel. So this is not about immigration. This is a way of the Trump administration kind of foisting this actual crackdown on, quote, anti-Semites and anti-Semitism, and shrouding it in a way of, see, folks, we're banning people from other countries. This is all just about cracking down on anti-Semitism. This is one of the worst things, in my opinion, that Trump has been doing. But again, it sounds, to the MAGA crowd, it might sound good. It might sound on paper like he's cracking down on immigration, but it's actually just a way of trying to bankrupt Harvard, because Harvard depends on these foreign students coming in. They pay a massive amount of tuition. So this is a way of kind of like muscling Harvard by, hurting them revenue wise.
I'm out of breath because I'm, I just lifted with my legs. I did butt kicks with my monkey boot. I know that's a crazy sentence, but it's true. So hold up. Moose lambs are coming to the United States. They're incompatible. By the way, I'm quoting someone, so if anybody wants to clip this. Moose lambs are incompatible with the United States. They have a hostile religion, this, that, the other. But banning them is bad because this is actually a crackdown on quote unquote anti-Semitism, which is actually free speech. I love how she hit that without like a second thought. There wasn't any thoughts about cultural incompatibility, mass immigration, Middle East and North Africa, Islam being hostile to Western values. There wasn't any of that stuff. She shot because she knows what's more important. What's more important is hostility to Israel. What's more important is hostility to, the quote unquote Jewish powers that be. And so on a perfect dime, while complaining about mass immigration, she somehow became against a Trump instantiated travel ban because it actually is quote unquote protecting Jews. That was amazing. That was like an amazing pivot. I don't know how Steven's going to call it out, but I'm incredibly curious.
Destiny, what do you think? Is he taking aim at 19 countries to take aim at Harvard?
I haven't heard the Harvard connection. Maybe that's there and we're just not aware of it. I do know that obviously he's been attacking Harvard a lot and trying to rescind their ability to bring in foreign students. When I look at immigration restrictions for conservatives, I view it the same way as I view them going after certain taxes. So like when they say like no tax on tips or no tax on overtime, it's not because they think that tips shouldn't be taxed or that overtime shouldn't be taxed. It's that they'll attack taxes no matter what. And I view immigration the same way. I think that the argument for these country bans is entirely pretextual. You know, as you said, for the attacker in Colorado, like the guy was Egyptian, but where's the Egyptian travel ban?
Well,
I think that Trump will just do whatever he can to restrict immigration as much as possible, especially from countries he doesn't like. And I think it's as simple as that. He did in his first term when he implemented the 7-country travel ban as well. So yeah, it's par for the course for him, for Republicans in general right now.
Why would Trump, though, Destiny, want to sow divisions and vilify these particular countries? What benefit is there to him, to America, to the Republican cause?
I mean, I think that, I don't know.
Everything that Nazi Barbie said earlier, but now she's backtracking away from because she would rather attack Jews than have consistent principles.
I think that these are just easy ones to target right now. A lot of people don't like this. I don't read Trump as like a very racist person. He just doesn't come off to me as a person who is like obsessed with like race. He comes off as a little bit more like xenophobic or nationalistic in general, populist in general, where he just doesn't want a lot of immigrants coming to the United States. And I don't necessarily think it's from like I don't want brown or black people coming.
Yeah, I'll agree here. I don't think it's like a specific bigotry. I don't think he's like, I hate all, Mexicans. I don't think it's, I hate all Muslims. He has friends who are Saudi. He probably has some rich Mexican friends or whatever. Effectively, it's whoever's friendly to Trump is who he's friendly with, right? It doesn't matter race, religion, creed, whatever. Anybody who sucks up to him, he's going to like. So, yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to engage with chat real quick, though. Thorson says, contempt, as you identified earlier with calling someone racist, fascist, etc. People feel they can just avoid all they say. That to be a good person, they should not show any agreement. Yeah, and I think that's insufficient for the line of argumentation that you have to deal with when it comes to fascists and racists. There's a reason why that fascism and racism was unconscionable in the thousands and the tens, because that's what pop culture said. And then with the democratization of the internet, people have come up with schizophrenic but compelling narratives about why racism is actually true or why bigotry is actually true. And it feels like you're uncovering some deep secret. But the way to get to those people is to say, it's not a secret. It's still stupid. And here's why your narrative sucks. That's how you deal with that. Now, plurality of tactics. If you want to shame people for being racist, then go ahead. That's totally fine. But I'm just saying that's not my tact. I always pursue truth, even when truth is inconvenient. Michelle Eggleston says, wasn't attempting to be prescriptive. You were using a definition I am not used to hearing from people besides you, and I was curious how you come up with your view. Thanks for the explainer. Yeah, Michelle, I'm sorry if that came across antagonistic. I wasn't trying to be antagonistic at all. If there was bubbling aggression or frustration underneath my commentary, it's not directed at you at all. However, I feel like I've seen dozens of debates that have gotten sidelined by the 14 points where a lefty thinks that they have like the perfect argument where they're like, Umberto Eco's 14 points. You fit 10 of them, therefore you're a fascist. And then the fascist is like, okay, or even if they're not fascist, they're like, okay, let's go through your points. And then they go through each point and they point out how, based off of Umberto Eco, the vast majority of people who exist are some level of fascist. And so instead of being a descriptor that furthers the conversation, it becomes a incredibly vague definition that dilutes and worsens the conversation. So it's not you. If I seem frustrated or aggressive or hostile, it's not you. It's a half decade to a decade of people using the 14 points and making conversations worse. Silver Jacket Man says, something to remember for folks saying America has no culture. America is 10 times bigger than most other countries. Texas has a culture. California has a culture. Yeah, you can articulate. I can tell you what Floridian culture. It's schizophrenia, right? We have Cubans, Caribbean Hispanics, Central Hispanics, white Americans, redneck Americans, Yankee Americans. We got Caribbean Black, North Black, Western Black. We got every kind of person that possibly exists in the United States of America exists in Florida. And we are constantly fighting drug addicts, bad traffic, and dinosaurs. And so if you're not interested in fighting drug addicts, dinosaurs, or bad traffic, then you shouldn't live in Florida, right? And it's a really interesting culture because you have this kind of like, you have the oppression of nature where you walk outside and it's 400% humidity and it's 92 degrees and there's dinosaurs in the water and there's mosquitoes everywhere. And you just kind of have to say, yeah, fuck it, I'm going for a swim. I love Florida. It's so schizophrenic, bro. Like I gotta say, physically, Southern California is the most beautiful place I've ever been in my life, but the people have it too good. And so they kind of become like vapid and ethereal and like chill in a way that's kind of like weird. Whereas I feel like Florida has the proper amount of beauty and horror to always keep you on your toes. I actually love Floridian culture in a lot of ways. Sacred Snow says, we'll play It's Always Sunny clips or say the M slur, which way Western streamer? Yeah, ideally I would do both. Let's get rich so I can say the M slur. Val says, I wonder what she would say if Biden said something similar. Oh, I already know that she has clips of calling Biden a pedo because he sniffs little girls' hair. I remember a lot of these types spazzing out over Biden calling them garbage. Oh, 100%. She would have no consistent values when it comes to Biden being a creep versus Trump being a creep. Whatever says, watch recently a candidate who is a convicted sex offender getting praise from The View. Unsurprising. Progressives and liberals, I love you. There's plenty of you here. You know, we were bouncing between 110, 120 at our peak. But there is liberals and progressives are too tolerant of dirtbags, and then the right wing just has no standards. So I know that you're like, hey, well, the right has worse standards. I agree with you, but sometimes you're too tolerant of dirtbags. Hassan Piker's coming to mind when I say that. Last comment, then we'll finish up the content. Shave Dog Butt says, I'm actually so pissed at Texas's politicians. I thought we were going to dab on the Californians with our own high-speed rail on time and under budget, but they just killed it. That's sad, man. That's sad. I rode the Bright Line down to Miami, and it was beautiful. Like it's not high-speed rail. It's not 200-mile-an-hour rail, but it is like 80-mile-an-hour rail, and I'll take it. Oh, you guys are praising the chair. The chair. Nice. All right, cool. I'm gonna let's finish up some content.
Like from that perspective, I just think he's just kind of xenophobic in general. It's the feeling that I get.
Lily, last time I'm referring to Trump's first administration where there was what was termed the Muslim ban. There was intense shock and outrage at those travel restrictions. It sparked immediate backlash and there were protests at the airport, but not this time around. It's almost as if, is it that people agree? Do you think? Is it that they don't care? Or has this kind of marginalizing behavior become normalized?
Well, I think what's going on is we're finally starting to see the effects of mass migration. We're starting to feel it. We're starting to now go into stores, go out in public, and you kind of look around and you notice, oh, there's more of them than us, or there's an equal number of them than us. We're starting to see the crime start to really peak. We're really starting to feel the effects of mass migration. So I think people in general, collectively, Black and white, by the way, are sick of the immigration. And so they are happy with any sort of travel restriction. Now, again, to go back to the Harvard thing, I think we should be restricting immigration from certain countries, especially when they predominantly do not assimilate. Like we had this whole Haitian crisis in Ohio. These people clearly should not be in our country. There should be a travel ban on countries like Haiti, for example. But again, I think people are just fed up with the immigration and they are sick of seeing their country being taken away from them by people who are coming from other countries that are not compatible with the West, and they bring crime and drugs to the streets.
The Haitian.
There's so much double speak here. Hold on, I'm going to pull something up while I let them continue to speak.
Crisis, as you termed it, or the situation, was really turned out to be largely untrue, even according to the governor there. And according to the 2024 report from the American Immigration Council, of the 19 peer-reviewed research papers between 2017 and 2024, there has been no correlation between an increase in migrant populations and an increase in crime rates. So why do you think that?
Because we have cell phones so we can videotape it. Don't worry, I'm going to show you some stats in a second.
That is something that is very easy to roll out because there are no figures to support that argument.
Lol, she did it.
I just don't believe anyone is actually doing that. The same as they're trying to.
Okay, so just lie. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to show you guys something. That way you can beat this over the head with your next chud who's like, crime is out of control. It's crazy out there. It's crazy. Do you see this spike, guys? Spike between 1900 and 1930. And then guess what happened? We had a massive war. So all the people who like killing people went overseas and killed people. Then we see a post-war peaceful period. Then we do have mass immigration in 1965. And I'm not going to pretend that like immigration and the drug war and all that kind of stuff didn't have an effect on crime. Of course it does. But we have a spike in the drug war. Weirdly enough, this is correlated to alcohol prohibition. So, you know, I'm not saying it's caused by alcohol prohibition, but I am saying that it's correlated with alcohol prohibition. And then here we have the war on drugs, and then we have the era of mass incarceration. And so in the mid 90s, we say, fuck it. We're going to get crime under control. And then we start hitting people with pretty serious sentences for drug activity. We cut crime pretty much in half. And now this is probably 2020 right here. We had a spike from 2020 during the worst economic issue since the Great Depression. And yet we are still currently at a homicide rate akin to the very peaceful 1960s. And yet you have these race grifting freaks who are acting like it's the height of the drug war during the 1980s and 1990s. They're wrong. They're lying to you. They're race baiters. They're race grifters. Just because you can find videos of youths, African-American and Hispanic youths, running around in super cities, punching people in the side of the head, does not mean that we're in the midst of a 1980s style crime wave. It's not true. So do not trust these lying freaks. Dealing with chat before we continue. Vrencan says, I've been seeing more race realism apology online. I'm really worried. I'm pretty worried right now, to be honest. Don't worry about it. Join Team Truth. Join the Grill Hottest. Join the centrist normies who are going to restore America to herself. We are going to come together as a community. We are going to hone our talking points as iron sharpens iron. Men and women and non-binaries sharpen each other. And we're going to make each other better. We're going to go out into our communities. We're going to work our jobs. We're going to pay our bills. We're going to pay our taxes. We're going to take care of our families. We're going to take care of our communities. And then when we have a little bit of extra time, energy, whatever, we're going to argue with all the race grifting freaks that are out there. We're going to make them look like freaks. And ultimately, we're going to win. I am calling for radical normalcy. Son Patty says, Connor is a classics man. Got to be 5. Don't know what you're talking about, but sure. Conservative liberalism says you'd think so, but sometimes he's a contrarian. I could see it being a 6. Don't know what you guys are talking about, but okay. Matthew Morton says, aw, snap, Connor's mogging us. Sometimes. Redheads are a race? No, they're a soulless class of people. They're like blanks from the Warhammer 40K universe. Sacred Snow says, you missed it. D showed her... Can't finish that sentence. Silver says, did you talk behind the scenes with Destiny interview shooting? Yeah. We did. So Silver, you might have seen the Destiny video. I think it got like 20K plus views on her channel, which is a channel record. And a lot of people thought it was really funny. Some members of my family did not appreciate my vulgar and crude and disgusting jokes. And so I am banned. I am banned from talking about gross sex shit. So I can't, I know that's like half of Destiny's audience. They're going to be disappointed that I can't talk about gross sex shit anymore. But I'm banned from gross sex shit. But besides that, it was an excellent conversation. The metrics are fantastic. The audience receiving is fantastic. And there probably will be a post-recorded video eventually, even if it's just YouTube shorts, of Steven and I hanging out and shooting guns. Scrolling. Managed democracy. Indeed. That's what we need to do, dude. We need to embrace the Helldivers memes. Haircut Commander says, Valor Media Network, obesity is our main cultural export. Based. Death Lily 76, good to see you. And thank you for the compliment in chat. I don't know if it was specifically you, but there was a comment section that's calling me fat. And I am like a little fat. I'm like 6'4". I'm 240 pounds, which, you know, might not sound like a lot, but it's a lot for me. But I have been lifting weights. I've been lifting weights on stream. I've been lifting weights 2 to 3 times for the better part of a year. So I have a little bit of a belly, and sometimes it pokes out when I have bad posture. Sometimes it pokes out when I'm, you know, not paying attention, or, you know, I get a little bit of out of breath when I work out or when I'm stressed or whatever. It's true. I need to do more cardio. However, you know, I've been lifting weights too, you know? So thank you. I don't know if it's you specifically, Death Lily, but if it was you in the comment section who said, you know what? Connor might be a little tubby, but he is working out. I appreciate it. The greatest argument against racists is that Black American culture is the most copied culture worldwide. I don't know. I think that just, you know, makes some racists more racists. Bo Dickerson says, pays for center right commentary. Connor Hassan chair is the best I can do. All right, last comment, then we're getting back into it. Jack-o'-lantern says, I think the reason people have a hard time describing American culture is because it's so dominant across the board. Yeah, it's like asking a fish what's water. You know what I'm saying? Anyways.
Skew the crime stats to prove that they're not racist. Like,
sorry, real quick. Whatever 4690 says, Connor, and if it stops a genuine terrorist, good. But we shouldn't have a blanket ban on nations to ban all people from that nation. I don't like jihadism. I don't like Islamism. I don't like theocracy. So if somebody's a theocrat, they should stay out of our country. But that should be a blanket policy. It shouldn't just apply to Muslims. It should apply to Falun Gongs and Tamil Tigers and Irish Republican Army and who else? Who else is doing like guerrilla warfare terrorist bullshit? Like Indian militia groups, you know, like it applies to Islamists and jihadists, but it should also apply to all militant groups that target civilians. So if you're a terrorist, you're not getting in the United States. If you're a theocrat, you can come into the United States on a visitation visa, but you're not getting citizenship. Anyways, let's get back.
You know, there was FBI crime stats that showed about 14% of the Black population committed about 50% of the crimes. They're trying to skew all these statistics in a way.
She did 1350 in reference to immigration. Wow, she really is dumb. Let's let her say that again. I'll try not to react too hard.
To prove that they're not racist. Like, you know, there was FBI crime stats that showed about 14% of the Black population committed about 50% of the crimes.
That's not even the stats. Lily, you're misquoting the stat. The Black population of the United States is 13% of the population, and they are responsible for around half of homicides. However, if you break it down further, then half of the population is female. Black females are not responsible for a substantive amount of the homicide, so you can go ahead and disinclude them. So it's really like 6% of the population. And then when you break it down even further, it's like 90%, 95% of the Black male population doesn't participate in violent crime. So, you know, you can say that it's disproportionate and it's a criminal issue and it needs to be dealt with, but you don't do that by misquoting race crime stats, you tool, you idiot. God, she sucks. Why does she have a platform?
They're trying to skew all these statistics in a way to where that's not the case because they're afraid of being called racist. Again, it's important to know who is putting out these stats, who has an interest in mass migration, who is pushing this on our country. The same people who are doing that have a vested...
The Jews! Let's see if she actually says the Jews/Israel. I'll be very curious if she actually says that.
Interest in hoodwinking the rest of us and putting out false data. They put out false data about COVID, so why wouldn't they lie about this?
Oh, she's just a machine, man. She's just a talking points machine.
I don't believe it. I mean, people have eyes. We have eyeballs. We can see the crime.
Destiny, can you see the crime?
No, I didn't see any Haitians eating dogs either. I think even Vance was on, I don't know if it was CNN or what, where he said that, you know, if we've got to make a story up to get people to care about an issue, then so be it. I mean, yeah, we don't live in like the same reality anymore. I think there's a whole alternative media environment right now that has kind of been created by the MAGA and MAGA adjacent crowds to kind of fabricate a reality to make people think whatever it is they want to think about things. You know, it's funny, Lily brought up the COVID stuff. I hear this said over and over again on Joe Rogan and other shows that, well, look at what they said about the conspiracy theorists. Like most of us turned out to be right. No, they were wrong about pretty much everything. You know, there were no permanent lockdowns. There were no permanent vaccine mandates. There were no permanent vaccine passports. There was no mass death from the vaccines. There were no mass side effects that weren't accounted for. You know, the lab leaked stuff is still stuff that's being looked into. There's no stronger evidence pointing towards it today than there was years ago. That like hydroxychloroquine still doesn't work. Ivermectin still doesn't work. Like every single conspiracy theory that people tried to have about COVID and the vaccines, basically all of them were wrong. But somehow they walk around today like all of their opinions were vindicated on everything. And now we've got parents who have children that are dying of measles in Texas. And it's just unbelievable to me. But I don't know what you do to deal with the differences in reality that we live in right now.
1 HP Destiny still mogging on 1 HP. And for those of you who don't know, that means health point. It means that in a video game setting, he would not be very powerful and he would be on the verge of death. And yet he's still somehow mogging Lilly Gaddis.
I want to circle back.
Myocarditis is not a thing. So people dropping dead from blood clots is not a thing, right?
No, you idiot. But it's like 90% reduced from the vaccination, you tool bag.
There's no back.
So myocarditis is a thing. The only reason we know about myocarditis because there was research on it. It's anywhere from, I think, 5 to 14 people per 100,000 injections develop myocarditis or pericarditis. These things are acute. These only last for a week or two. It's not a permanent ailment that you have. Also, you're more likely to develop myocarditis or pericarditis, which is inflammation of like the heart muscles or the tissue surrounding it. You're more likely to develop that as a result of contracting and having COVID and having the disease.
Mogged! Come on, Lily. You got to have a talking point ready for that. I'm looking for it. Let's see what you got to say. I'm sure you got boom. You know, he hit you with a talking point. He hit you with a lib cuck. He hit you with a lib cuck talking point. He just smashed you with one. Where's your counterpunch? Where's your counterpunch, Lily? You got to have one ready. You got one in the chamber? Are you ready, Lily? Come on, we're ready for it. We're ready to hear you smash this libtard cuckold. He's on 1 HP, Lily. All you got to do is land one hit and you can knock him out. Come on, I believe in you.
People drop dead all the time. It happens. We're just paying attention more to it now than we were before for reasons of trying to prove the vaccine is killing people. The reality is we talk about, can't we open our eyes and look around and see what's going on? If there are hundreds of millions of COVID vaccine doses that were given to people in the United States, I shouldn't have to travel to the deep, dark internet on Rumble to find out somebody who's died, you know, from one of these vaccinations. And right now, it's just the way that the world is.
Come on, Lily. He just hit you with the lip cuck point. You got to have a counterpunch. Let's go. He's setting you up. Come on.
You can't find these people dying.
That's because they're lying about why people are dying in the hospital.
Oh, man. Excess deaths 2020 and 2021. You're about to get mogged again. Excess deaths refer to the difference between the number of deaths observed during a specific period and the expected number of deaths based on historical trends. In 2020 and 2021, the COVID-19 pandemic caused significant excess mortality worldwide. Our World in Data estimated that 18 million deaths worldwide were due to the pandemic, exceeding the 6 million COVID-19 deaths reported during that time. 1.1 million people died in the United States alone. Lol. 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 If she goes for the gunshot, I'm going to lose my mind. If she goes for the gunshot meme, I'm going to lose it.
We're not going to go back, with all due respect, and go back into COVID because that's not really a relevant topic anymore.
Oh,
my goodness.
Saved by the moderator, the referee. You know, Destiny on 1 HP. Boom! You know, hey, myocarditis and pericarditis is a thing. Boom! But it's caused more by the disease than it is by the vaccinations. Boom! Half your conspiracy theories are bullshit and never happened. Boom! And then Lily is the boxer in the corner. All she needs to do is land a light jab and she'll knock him out. And what does she have? She has people lie about stuff. And then the referee steps in front of the fight and waves his hands and says, hold on, break it up, you two, break it up, you two. Even though Steven hasn't had enough chalky milk today, even though he took half of his Vyvanse pill because he's trying to detox right now, even though he's dehydrated and sick, you know, it's very clear that if he lands another hit, that he's going to knock Lilly Gaddis completely out rhetorically. That is embarrassing. Embarrassing. What happened? The internet got knocked out? What's going on?
On Rumble to find out somebody who's died, you know, from one of these vaccinations. And
let's deal with chat real quick. Connor, that is exactly what Nick Fuentes said about Harvard. Is she a groiper? No, she panders to groipers, but she sucks. She's not smart enough to be a groiper. Embarrassing. Whatever says, okay, Connor, now do Actual Justice Warrior. Okay. Who, by the way, Actual Justice Warrior and I are on friendly terms, but you know that dude like lied about a debate that we did a few years ago where he said like early childhood education isn't going to do anything in order to help the blacks. And then he said, you need to read these 5 books. And then I read one of the books and like in the chat, and it was like it was the book that he referenced most often. And when we get to the end of the book, it literally says that early childhood education is the primary way in which to reduce criminality in the black population. Yeah, that guy, like AJW's been nice to me, so don't get it twisted. And I did defend him during the debate drama, where he was debating a prompt that he had agreed to, but then everybody else didn't really want to stick with, and so he kept trying to debate the debate prompt that nobody else wanted to deal with. I did defend him during that drama because it was my fault for setting incorrect expectations, and so as a result, the debate sucked. That's my fault. It made interesting drama for a week, so you're welcome for the content. However, you know, just because I was nice to him in one circumstance in which I felt like he was being unfairly maligned, and he was nice to me in response, doesn't mean that he didn't do that shit where he said, ha, 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 ha. We just need to mass incarcerate people, and we can't do anything environmentally in order to improve the conditions within the inner city black community. We've been trying to improve their conditions for decades, and it's resulted in nothing but misery and death. And then like anime laugh. And then the book that he recommends to me recommends exactly what I was saying. Hilarious. Ironside says, Connor, the 2000s, 2010s anti-racism was kind of cringe. Take the word Latinx, for example, which is only good if you really want to get under a Hispanic person's skin. Yeah, let's start using Latinx as an insult. Florida culture is also Geridol. Is that like STD prevention for old people? Bro, Florida heat grates on the soul. It does. Silver Jacket Man says, I used to hand out business cards at bars that claimed I was a billionaire astronaut dinosaur hunter. Based. Florida invented freedom? No, we just maintain it. Do some hip lunges, Connor? No. That's like asking me to do cardio. That's not going to happen. Crime is down by 50% since 1990. You're right, Biz D. The crime. I'm not saying that crime can't stack up. Crime could pop up. And we should deal with crime. And we should deal with the crime we have. But do not fall for the race grift bullshit. Bumbling Bioengineer says crime was just low because of McCarthyism / sarcastic. Well, we didn't go far enough with McCarthyism. There's too many commies. Dank Brandon says, I told my wife in 2019 that was going to be a spike in crime when people went back to work and got out of the house, Connor. Yeah. And guess what? You were right. Everybody was home and they didn't have enough money. So there was a spike in crime in 2020. And then people went home and it was still spiking. And then it was done. Grill Hottest. I've been grilling a lot. Based. Welcome to the Grill Hottest, brother. The Devil says, we just want to point out that the whole point of the interview in MIB was to hire Jay as Kay's replacement. The 4 junior officers were part of the psych out test in contrast of Jay's free thinking approach. Cool. Sacred Snow says, on the crime talking point, if they're denying stats, you could appeal to common sense as well. Do you think crime was higher in the Wild West and the apex of the mafia during the gang wars of the 90s? Or do you think crime is higher now? It's obviously that it's lower. They're denying reality. Agreed. These people are lying. LB says, all of you central normies are social democrats. No, we're not. Stop insulting us and maligning us. Last comment, then we're getting back to the content. Haircut Commander says, become a radical normie. Anyways, let's talk about Goonopolis. Yeah, we segregate all the gooners to Goonopolis, right? Anyways. All right, Silver's a friend of the channel, so I got to read his comment. Wasn't sure if Destiny was flirting with you or if he was anything else mode, disinterested Valor Media Network. He was probably partially flirting, partially sick, partially tired, partially anything else mode.
Right now, that's just the way that the world is. You can't find these people dying.
That's because they're lying
anywhere.
about why people are dying in the hospital.
We're not going to go back, with all due respect, and go back into COVID because that's not really a relevant topic.
Shaved dog butt, nice.
Anymore. My goodness, we had that debate plenty enough during the time.
Thank you, Matthew Morton. I agree.
I just want to circle back, Destiny, to something that Lilly said earlier when she was talking about these travel bans being a way of preventing people entering the country. And
I think I'm good. It's not anything against Miss Gaddis, but I just think that she's stupid, and I think she got mogged, and I think she got mogged by a 1 HP person, which is hilarious. So let's go ahead and do a summary, and then I'm going to address chat, and then we'll move into the next segment. So, in summary, Stephen Bennell was on 1 HP. He didn't have enough chalky milk. He was dehydrated. He was sick, and he was not particularly energetic today. However, Lilly Gaddis is not particularly a competent debater, nor is she particularly intelligent. And as a result, she's a talking points machine. So she was able to regurgitate all of the dissident right-wing shenanigans. She was able to say every single talking point that is going to have like MAGA bros and anti-tech MAGA bros and groypers and dissident right-wing freaks who like have like sub 80 IQ. She said everything that's going to have them being like, oh, lol. Oh, yeah, you got him. Like she said all of that stuff, but she didn't have any depth. She had the depth of a shower. Okay. She had the depth of a puddle. And so as a result, Steven, even on 1 HP, was able to block and counterpunch her and basically knock her out. So that was embarrassing. Lilly, be thankful to your lucky stars that you're a moderately attractive woman who can say dissident right-wing talking points. Congratulations on finding your grift. I hope you get your bag. But realistically, number one, you're making the world a worse place. Number two, you kind of suck up as a person. Number three, you're not that intelligent. Number four, I'm going to repeat it because I'm on 1 HP right now. You're making the world a worse place. So maybe stop. Maybe stop doing that. Maybe stop making the world a worse place. Maybe stop acting out for attention. Maybe stop pandering to some of the worst people on the internet. And you got mogged. You got annihilated by a blue-haired lib cuck. I have to go all the way up, and I have to go all the way down, and then I have to go all the way back up again. And it's a lot of movement. It's a lot of muscle.